Chapter 787. Director Liu and Deputy Director Li didn't have lunch at Jiang Hai's place. After talking to Jiang Hai, they left. They would have to listen to Jiang Hai's opinion on what to do. After they left, Jiang Hai also fell into contemplation. Sitting under the big tree at the door, he kept thinking about what Bureau Chief Liu and Deputy Bureau Chief Li said to him today, about whether or not to invest in real estate. According to what they said, Jiang Hai would make a lot of money if he got into real estate. In fact, Jiang Hai had a rough idea of how much money he could make. Building a high-rise building with 20 or 30 floors would cost $30 to $40 million. Including the cost of acquiring the land, one building would cost $20 million, which would add up to about $50 million. But in a building, there would be 2 households per floor, and each household would average 120 square meters. There would be 4 entrances to each building, and 30 floors would mean 240 households. $2,000 per square meter, which would be $1.44 million per house. 240 households would mean $345.6 million. Why was real estate so valuable? That was why it was so valuable, even if they increased the investment and spent $100 million to build a building. Even if the quality was so good that it made people's hair stand on end, they would still earn $200 million after the construction. Of course, this money would not all go to the developers. The government officials would definitely get some of the money as well. But if Jiang Hai took the lead here, he would approve the land here, then let the local people come over to build it, and then sell it to the rich people in the country. Jiang Hai would get at least half of the profits, which would be $100 million. After deducting the taxes, Jiang Hai would make about $10 million per house. Naturally, there couldn't be only one building in a community. If they built 20 or 30 buildings, they would make $200 or $300 million. To be honest, he would be lying if he said he wasn't tempted by the money. More importantly, if the community was built, it would attract more people to settle down in Winthrop. In that case, the people who came to buy things wouldn't just be tourists, but ordinary household expenses. This would greatly increase Winthrop's expenses. Not only would the sales of furniture, decorations, and clothes increase greatly. He finally understood why Mayor Wallace didn't lure them here even though he knew Jiang Hai wouldn't sell the land. Firstly, it was because he didn't want to offend these rich people. Secondly, it would be beneficial for them if the community was built. To be honest, Jiang Hai would be lying if he said he wasn't tempted by the hundreds of millions of dollars in business. Although he made a lot of money in a year, the problem was that it would be beneficial for him, the other party, and Winthrop. But vaguely, Jiang Hai felt that something was wrong, which was why he was so conflicted. Fortunately, Chief Liu and the others knew that this matter couldn't be rushed, so they let Jiang Hai think about it carefully. After a simple lunch, Jiang Hai continued to lie on the recliner and think. But to be honest, he was really conflicted and didn't know what to do. Unknowingly, the sky gradually darkened. After dinner, Jiang Hai and the others went back to rest. Tonight, the ones in charge of accompanying Jiang Hai were Chia, Qijia, Sheila, and Ohelia. Recently, Jiang Hai and the others had gotten used to the rotation system. From Sunday to Friday, they changed people every day. On Sunday, Valentina and the others came back and occupied Jiang Hai's time. Of course, during the day, it was different. Usually, Jiang Hai was quite concerned about these things. After all, a dragon's nature was quite good. So whenever a woman teased him, Jiang Hai always couldn't control his primitive power. But today, Jiang Hai seemed to have something on his mind. After dealing with Chia, Jiang Hai also dealt with Sheila and Ohelia. When they fell asleep, Jiang Hai and Qijia were still fighting. Perhaps sensing that something was wrong with Jiang Hai, Qijia, who was straddling Jiang Hai, couldn't help but let the battle continue. At the same time, she patted Jiang Hai's chest. "Why are you acting so weird today? You seemed absent-minded when you were doing this." Looking at Jiang Hai, Qijia asked with some doubts. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also returned to his senses temporarily and looked at her apologetically. "I'm always thinking about other things." What those two said to me when they left today made me hesitate. Touching Qi Jie's ankle with both hands, Jiang Hai thought for a while. He couldn't figure it out by himself, so it was better to ask someone else. What's there to hesitate about? Do you want to enter this industry? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jie couldn't help but stop. She wiped the sweat on her forehead, then looked at Jiang Hai strangely and asked. Well, it's not that I can't join, because it's really profitable. I did some calculations this afternoon. Even if the quality of the buildings is the best, I can still make more than 100 million yuan per building, which is 3 billion yuan per building. After converting it to US dollars and including taxes, I can still make about 300 million yuan per building. It should be a profitable business, but I still feel that something is wrong. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Jiang Hai looked at her with his posture. Indeed, Jiang Hai really didn't understand. Such a profitable business, why don't they do it themselves and let you do it? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jie also looked at him and asked with some confusion. According to Jiang Hai, they can still make so much money with the best quality. If the quality only meets the requirements, they can make at least 50% more. Such a good business, why don't they do it themselves and let Jiang Hai do it? This made her a little confused. Because this is the United States. If the government of Wuxia comes and says that we want to buy a piece of land and build a community here, the government of the United States will definitely not agree. You know, the government of the United States is very particular about the sovereignty of land. If the government of Wuxia buys a piece of land here, it will definitely be a problem whether the land belongs to Wuxia or the United States. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Jiang Hai also understood why these people wanted him to make money. It was because of Jiang Hai's connections in Massachusetts. It was because Jiang Hai could dig out land from the hands of the United States government. This was the reason why they joined him. You also know that this is the United States. Have you thought about it? If you buy land and build a building here, if anything goes wrong, will you be the person that the government of the United States will look for? You can't have forgotten that you have a manor here, right? Why do you want to let your manor be threatened for a business deal of $300 million? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jie sat on his lap and asked him curiously. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Jiang Hai instantly felt that there was something wrong in his mind. He immediately figured it out. Yes, he only cared about the benefits, but didn't see the threat behind the benefits. The current relationship between Wuxia and the United States, there was no way to talk about it here. If Wuxia used this place to do something to the United States government, then Jiang Hai, the person who bought the land, would bear the brunt of it. Now, Jiang Hai was living well here. First, he paid taxes well, and second, he didn't have any weaknesses that could be used against him. In this world, money was the most important thing. One was Walmart, and the other was the royal family of Du Feimin. Although these were Jiang Hai's protection, Jiang Hai didn't believe that no one was interested in his manor. Now, Jiang Hai didn't have a tail, so they couldn't catch Jiang Hai's problem. But once Jiang Hai had any weaknesses that could be used against him in the hands of those in power in the United States, then his money and his foundation would be destroyed. Jiang Hai wasn't the kind of person who would sacrifice himself for the country. Perhaps some people would say that he didn't have the right values. Without the country, there wouldn't be a home. Without a home, there wouldn't be him. Everything he had belonged to the country. It was only right that he shed his blood for the country. But now, Jiang Hai didn't just have to think about himself. His family also had to think about. If there was an accident and his whole family died, who could he reason with? $300 million wasn't a small amount, but for Jiang Hai, it wasn't indispensable. Once he thought this through, Jiang Hai understood. I was almost trapped. You're still the best. You saw through it with one glance. Jiang Hai said with a smile as he patted Qi Jie's butt. Then, he picked her up, put her on the bed, and began to attack her. This heart disease was finally cured. He also had to thank Qi Jie properly. And in Jiang Hai's gratitude, Qi Jie quickly reached an indescribable state. At this time, Jiang Hai also let out a long breath and then stopped. You really didn't give me any time to prepare. Yi gave Jiang Hai a strange look. Qi Jia patted his arm. In fact, Qi Jia was quite happy that Jiang Hai would listen to her. At least, Jiang Hai was the type to listen to advice. Hey, you're all sweaty. Let's go take a shower together. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also said to her with a smile. No, this thing stays in the body. The chances of pregnancy are higher. You don't want a baby. Glancing at Jiang Hai, Qi Jia lazily prepared to go to sleep, but Jiang Hai directly picked her up. What's the hurry? I'll get you a new one. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jia couldn't help but blush and pat his back. This guy is really in a hurry. That night, Qi Jia didn't know when she fell asleep. She just vaguely felt that when she fell asleep, the sky seemed to be almost bright. As for Jiang Hai, he also thanked her properly. Early the next morning, after Jiang Hai got up, he called Deputy Director Li and rejected his proposal. Just as Qi Jia said, Jiang Hai didn't lack money. Contentment is a long way to go. He didn't want to earn that 300 million. Chapter 788. Hello, it's me. Ah. That's a pity. If we have a chance in the future, we must cooperate again. Okay. Goodbye. With that last sentence, Deputy Director Li hung up the phone. Then he looked at Director Liu, who was sitting in the distance drinking tea, and walked over helplessly. What? He didn't agree? Seeing Deputy Director Li coming over, Director Liu took a sip of tea, and then said with an intoxicated face. He got this tea from Jiang Hai. When he left yesterday, Jiang Hai gave him 0.5 kilogram. It was extremely precious to him. Usually, with his rank, he could only get 2 or 3 grams of this level of tea. Of course, there were less than 20 people in the country who could afford to drink freely. Yes, he didn't agree. Hearing Director Liu's words, Deputy Director Li shrugged helplessly. Actually, this is understandable. If it were me, I wouldn't agree either. Hearing Deputy Director Li's words, Director Liu put down the cup and said with a chuckle. In fact, from the beginning, when he knew that Jiang Hai could make billions a year, he was quite unconfident about his mission. Although he couldn't speak English, he wasn't stupid. Yes, in fact, from the beginning, it was those guys in the country who made a mistake. They wanted to trap Jiang Hai with a profit of $300 million. As long as Jiang Hai understood some of the twists and turns in it, he wouldn't have agreed. Hearing Director Liu's words, Deputy Director Li sighed. Sometimes, the people at the top thought too simply of things. Forget it. We have already done our best and left it up to fate. Whatever happens next has nothing to do with us. It was Jiang Hai who rejected us. Let's have fun for a few days and go back to report. In fact, from the beginning, these people didn't expect to reach an agreement. The first thing was to buy Jiang Hai's manor with $1.2 billion. Jiang Hai must be crazy to sell it to them. The second thing was to trick Jiang Hai with 300 million. Was Jiang Hai out of his mind? Did he lack $300 million? If this matter had happened in China, it would have been easy to settle. However, the problem was that this was America. Hence, there was only one word that could be used: no. That's true. TSK. But the tea and wine there are really good. TSK, tisk. Hearing Director Liu's words, Deputy Director Li was relieved. Indeed, this was not their responsibility, and it had nothing to do with them. They should just enjoy the rest of the time. After these two people decided to give up on Jiang Hai's side was very calm. After making a phone call to Deputy Director Li in the morning, Jiang Hai once again began to live a very indifferent life. Every day, he was so lazy that it made people's hair stand on end. Everyone in his family also had their own duties. To be honest, Jiang Hai's life every day was both enviable and boring. Because he had nothing to do. He had money, he had women, he ate the best beef in the world, the best fish and shrimp, the best pork, the best vegetables, and he drank the best wine in the world. He really didn't have any pursuits to speak of. Other people had to have a goal to strive for, but he didn't have a goal. Just like a certain rich man said, set a goal for yourself first. Earn 100 million, and see how many years it would take to earn that much. Jianghu realized that it wouldn't take long for him to earn 100 million. He wasn't the kind of person who liked to seek excitement and difficulties. This was also related to the changes in society and his inner growth. He remembered that when he was in school, he liked the feeling of passion the most. When he was in elementary school and junior high school, watching Digimon or Slam Dunk could make him feel passionate for half a day. When he was in junior high school and high school, watching One Piece, Naruto, Shinigami, and so on could also make him forget himself. Why were they all Japanese? Let's just ignore this for now. At that time, everything had to be done with passion. Young children liked to imitate the style of sci-fi movies the most. Jianghu had also fantasized that he had transmigrated to another world with passion, leveling up and killing monsters in another world. Or he had some ability to benefit the people, destroy the beautiful island, unify the world, and establish a global village. But when he was 25 years old, Jianghu knew that it was all just a fantasy. When he was thinking about these things, it was boring and didn't matter. But people still had to eat. When society smoothed out people's edges and corners, people's pursuits also changed. Just like Jianghu. In the past, he was still fantasizing about becoming Long Outyan. But now, he was just enjoying his current life. This was not inspirational at all, and he had no feelings. No one liked Jianghu, who had no passion at all. But Jianghu liked it, and his friends, to be honest, were envious of him. People's pursuits were different. Some people were obsessed with making others admire them. Some people were obsessed with changing the world. Some people were willing to make themselves busy so that they could improve themselves. But in Jianghu's eyes, it was just a job. Wasn't it? If it wasn't to earn money, who would want to work? The most important problem now was that Jianghu was not short of money. So this proposition ended perfectly. In this way, Jianghu lay on his reclining chair again, lying in a drunken stupor for a few days. Today was as usual. After Jianghu finished eating in the morning, he went to the manor casually and then went to his own big tree in the small courtyard to rest. He was ready for lunch in this busy day. But at this moment, a doorbell rang. Jianghu looked and saw a delivery van parked in front of his house. Coming. Looking at the reluctant driver sitting in the car, Jianghu curled his lips. After a shout, he rode past the driver's small four-wheeled motorcycle and drove toward the door. To be honest, in the past, on some forums in China, there were a lot of people talking about how good the US was, etc. But no one said that the US express delivery was good. In fact, the Chinese express delivery companies were much better than the US by more than one street. No, they were even better than the US by several national highways. The United States express delivery was quite bad. The service attitude was very bad, extremely bad, especially bad. There was never the saying of door-to-door delivery, and the attitude was very bad. The speed was so slow that it was outrageous. If you bought something on Amazon in the United States, 9 days was the standard time. Because it said that the delivery time was 3 to 7 days, excluding holidays. Saturday and Sunday were also holidays. So, basically, you will need 9 days to buy anything. Don't complain that it was too long, because this was the standard time. If you think it's too long, you can add more money and it will be delivered the next day. But the problem is, the extra money might be more expensive than the items you bought. In China, even the express delivery will be delivered within a week. Of course, there will be some accidents. But most of the time, it will be delivered within 4 days. Also, the express delivery service will be very good and will call in advance to check if there is anyone at home. For example, in Bing City, where Jianghu lives, the express delivery service will be delivered to his doorstep. In some southern cities, if the express delivery service is not delivered to the doorstep, they will put it in the delivery box in the neighborhood. But in the United States, it was impossible. The express delivery service will be delivered directly to your doorstep. If you live in an apartment, the express delivery service will call you. If you live in a small villa, the express delivery service will knock on your door. If you are not at home, the express delivery service will be sent back. The express delivery service will tell you that you have 1 day to collect it tomorrow. If you don't collect it yourself, the express delivery service will be sent back. The express delivery service will not be returned. If you still want to buy the express delivery service, then you will have to pay for another set of express delivery service. Also, it's best to inform your neighbor to help you receive the express delivery service. Of course, in the United States, because there were more people who sent strange things, it was hard to say whether your neighbor was willing to accept it. The express delivery fee was very expensive, the speed was very slow, and the attitude was very bad. Therefore, the American people were not so addicted to online shopping. It was impossible to buy something that cost a few dollars or more than $10 by express delivery, and it was impossible in the United States. In the United States, anything that can be bought at the roadside shops will not be sent by express delivery service. But Jianghu and his family had many dealings with express delivery service. This was because Jianghu's family had 2 WeChat businessmen. What is it this time? Jianghu asked the 2 people in the car as he rode the 4-wheeled motorcycle to the gate. Who knows? It's so heavy. Oh my God, man, the woman in your family is really a spendthrift. Looking at Jianghu, a person in the car came down and took out a large cardboard box from the back. He handed it to Jianghu and said with an unhappy face. Jianghu had long been used to this kind of attitude, so he just smiled and said nothing. After taking a look, the package was sent from San Francisco. Jianghu frowned. He didn't know what was inside, but it was really heavy. After signing his name, the person in the van left directly. Jianghu put the huge box on the small car and moved it back to his house. As soon as he moved in, Jianghu saw Feng Yunqian and Ai Xiaoxi running out of the house anxiously. You guys, what did you buy? Looking at the 2 people in front of him, Jianghu knew that they must have bought something, but Jianghu didn't know what they bought. Heartless, this is for you. But who knew, when Jianghu said this, the 2 people rolled their eyes at him at the same time, and then said to Jianghu. Hearing their words, Jianghu was even more confused. What is it that they bought for me? Chapter 789. You bought it for me? What did you buy for me? Hearing their words, Jianghu looked at them with some doubts. He really didn't know. Hearing what Jianghu said, Feng Yunqian and Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but roll their eyes at him. Then they took out a bunch of keys and cut open the tape outside the package. Then a golden thing appeared in front of Jianghu. After taking a closer look, Jianghu looked at the 2 of them strangely, because the thing in this box, speaking of it, is really a bit unlucky. This is a box of paper, but Jianghu is no stranger to this paper. It is the paper burned for the elderly at home. This is not easy to get in the United States. Only San Francisco, where a large number of Chinese live, has this thing. But Jianghu really doesn't understand, why do they have to make these things? The Qingming festival is already over. We're almost there, idiot. Looking at Jianghu's confused expression, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but scold him. In fact, a few days ago, when she was on the phone with her family, her mother asked her if she would come back for the Mid-Autumn Festival. After all, they haven't seen Ai Xiaoxi for a long time. After confirming that she wouldn't come back for the festival, she casually said that she would visit her grandfather's grave in a few days. After Ai Xiaoxi heard it, she also wrote it down. Then she quietly bought this box of paper for Jianghu. It is indeed almost there, and Jianghu won't go back to Bingxing to pay his respects. It is enough to burn paper here to express his sincerity. As for whether it can be sent, who knows? In fact, this thing is more of a formality, a way for the living to remember their ancestors. According to materialistic thinking, when a person dies, there is nothing left. No one knows if there is really a soul or something like that. Anyway, Jianghu has never seen it. As for Jianghu's generation, not many people believe in this thing. Perhaps in a few decades, when the next generation of Jianghu and the others grew up, even this tradition would probably disappear. For Jianghu, he didn't really remember things like burning paper offerings. Just like what his mother said, what was the use of being unfilial when alive and screaming when dead? People should be filial when they're alive. Once they're gone, no matter how ostentatious they are, it's just for show. The people who should be filial to them can't be remembered. Therefore, before Ai Xiaoxi came, Jianghu would only burn it during the Qingming festival. During the New Year, he would go home and burn it. That was all. But now that Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan still remembered this matter, Jianghu was quite pleased. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have remembered. What's the date? Looking at the two people in front of him, Jianghu touched his hair and smiled. This thing doesn't have a date to burn it. The day after tomorrow is the date, but we can burn it tonight or tomorrow. She rolled her eyes at Jianghu. It seemed that Jianghu really didn't understand this, and Ai Xiaoxi knew a little about this because she was born in the countryside. Among the traditional festivals of Wuxia, there were 3 festivals, but everyone was familiar with only the Shangyuan festival, which was the 15th day of the first lunar month. It was commonly known as the Lantern Festival, and so on. For modern people, after the 15th day, it meant that the new year had passed. Of course, in the current situation, very few people would go to work after the 15th day of the first lunar month. Basically, after the 5th day of the first lunar month, the 6th day, and the 7th day of the first lunar month, they would go to work. The rhythm of people's lives now was completely different from ancient times. In addition to the Shangyuan Lantern Festival, very few people knew about the Zhongyuan and Shiyuan festivals. The 3 festivals were mainly related to Taoism. Taoism had 3 officials, the heavenly official, the earthly official, and the water official. The so-called heavenly official gave blessings, so in ancient times, everyone celebrated the Shangyuan festival. This was passed down. The earthly official pardoned sins, and the water official resolved disasters. The birthdays of the 3 officials were the 15th day of the first lunar month, the 15th day of the 7th lunar month, and the 15th day of the 10th lunar month. In ancient times, the 15th day of the 10th lunar month was the time for the big families to worship their ancestors, but it was no longer the time. After all, after the establishment of the new Wuxia, there were no more families to speak of, so Jianghu and the others did not celebrate the Shangyuan festival. As for the Zhongyuan festival, not many people knew about it, but in recent years, when the traditional culture of Wuxia was promoted, it also seemed to be publicized. At this time of the year, there were sparks of fire everywhere in Wuxia. It was basically the same everywhere in the country, but there was no worship on the official day. There seemed to be some theories about it. Jianghu did not understand these, but since Ai Xiaoxi knew, then he would just follow her explanation. After understanding the situation, Jianghu and the others began to sort out the things in the box. There was a lot of yellow paper in the box, and there were also a lot of paper money. In addition, there were also a lot of folded paper, such as gold ingots. Every place had different customs and things, but the northeast where Jianghu was from was somewhat similar to the customs of Lu province. After all, many people in the northeast had gone there when Lu province went to Guangdong, so Jianghu just had to listen to Ai Xiaoxi for a lot of things. After working for half a day, Jianghu finished these things before night fell. Qijia and Chia had seen these things before, so they were not surprised. On the other hand, Aphrodite and the others were a little confused. Delina and Marian had gone back with Jianghu during the new year, so they had naturally seen these things, so they were not unfamiliar with them. After Jianghu briefly explained it to these people, at night, Jianghu and the others left the manor. They could not burn this thing in their own house. Even though Jianghu's house was so big, they could not burn it in their own house. According to the older generation, burning this thing would attract some ghost messengers and wandering ghosts. Attracting them into their own house was obviously not a wise choice. Therefore, they had to go out and find a crossroad to burn. After driving for more than 10 minutes to Winthrop, Jianghu and the others found a large crossroad. They did not know if crossroads were useful in the United States, but Jianghu was just doing his best. He first went to find a branch, then drew a circle, leaving an opening in the middle. This was the place for the ghost servants to withdraw money. Then, Jianghu ignited the yellow paper he had written the address on. Then, he began to chant as he placed the paper in the circle. Not long after, the raging fire started to burn. Even from afar, people were able to see it. Many people who lived around the town saw the fire. Some people even called the police. What a joke. In the United States, Wuxia had many customs that were difficult to understand. For example, Chinese medicine, ceremonies, speaking habits, etc. Jianghu had said this before. Wuxia liked to be polite when talking to each other. For example, I'll treat you to a meal when you have time. Next time, let's get together when we have the chance. Wuxia always said such things. But in the United States, if you said such things, this person would really wait for you to treat him to a meal and get together with him. You could go Dutch. If you did not look for him, he would be unhappy and think that you were lying to him. Some radical people could not even be friends. There were also some people who boiled Chinese medicine at home. Then, their neighbors would call the police and say that they were making drugs at home. It was the same during ceremonies. In the United States, other than during protests, gatherings had to be reported to the government. As for the Chinese, this was an accident. This was because the Chinese in the United States did not have the idea of having only one child. Therefore, a Chinese family was sometimes really big. To them, it was time to meet their ancestors or gather together. Hundreds of people had come all of a sudden. In the beginning, it had alarmed the police quite a bit. It was only in recent years that things had gotten better. As for burning paper during the ceremony, this was naturally not allowed in the United States. However, Jianghu did not know about this. Other people did not know either. When people saw Jianghu and the others burning paper, some good citizens called the police. They did not know what Jianghu was doing, so it was better to let the police ask. Just as Jianghu and the others were burning paper, 2 police cars drove over. After seeing that it was Jianghu, the people who got out of the 2 police cars were much more polite. They smiled and walked to Jianghu's side. Mr. Jiang, what are you doing here? Looking at Jianghu who was still burning paper, the 2 police officers asked curiously. Burning paper. How should I explain this? This is a custom in Wuxia when we pay respects to our ancestors who have passed away. Is this not allowed? Seeing that the police had come over, Jianghu was stunned for a moment. Then, he remembered that this might not be allowed. After all, in the United States, people would send flowers during ceremonies. No one would burn paper. What Jianghu was doing now seemed to be somewhat problematic. There are indeed some residents who don't know what you are doing, so they reported it to us. I don't know how long you will be doing this. Hearing Jianghu's words, the 2 policemen also smiled. This matter is really not easy to say. If it was someone else, they might have opened their mouth to drive them away. But since it was Jianghu, they really couldn't say anything. Fortunately, Jianghu's burning of paper was also very fast. After hearing their words, Jianghu and the others also sped up their pace. After about 10 minutes, the things in the box were all burned. Seeing that the fire had burned through, Jianghu and the others also apologized, then got in the car and left. After Jianghu and the others left, the 2 police officers came and watched the fire go out before leaving. Otherwise, if there was a fire or something like that, Jianghu couldn't run away, and they couldn't run away either. It seems that I can't burn paper casually in the future. Touching his nose, Jianghu grinned. This was indeed a very annoying thing. Although Jianghu didn't care much about these formal problems, he would still burn paper when it was time. But next time, he might have to find a way to burn it again. Chapter 790. The incident of the Hungry Ghost Festival was just a small episode for Jianghu. However, Qi Jia, Chia, Feng Yunshan, and Ai Xiaoxi were tempted to watch horror movies. Therefore, in the past few nights, they deliberately found a few movies to watch, such as A Nightmare on Elm Street, True Ghost Stories, and so on. They were all frightened. Jianghu was the only man in the family. Although it seemed that Azalina and Galina felt more secure, Jianghu was still their best choice. He had to admit that, unlike China, where people were not allowed to become spirits or ghosts after the founding of the country, there were really ghosts abroad, so the degree of horror was indeed not bad. However, with Jianghu's strong heart, it was not easy to scare him. However, he felt that the scariest movie was a movie called Horror Cruise. This movie was filmed in Australia and Europe, and had nothing to do with the United States. However, it was indeed quite scary. The horror was not about what was in it. To be honest, there were no ghosts in it, and there was not even much blood. However, there was something that struck Jianghu's heart the most. Reincarnation. This story was about a woman named Jessie. She was not a good mother. She would abuse her children. Then one day, she went out to sea with a group of bad friends to play. In the end, there was an accident and the boat capsized. At this time, a cruise ship floated over. Then, they walked on it, and then a horrible scene appeared, because Jessie was constantly killing people, and she was also killing herself. Every Jessie had to kill 5 people. The 2 groups of people who boarded the ship early, Victor who boarded the ship later, and Donnie, Sally, and Greg who boarded the ship later. She would throw the bodies into the sea, and then she would be killed. The one who killed her was herself. She used this to complete a cycle. She would be killed by her next self indefinitely. This was her fate. The first generation fell into the sea and drowned in order to avoid the second generation's axe. The second generation was chopped by the third generation on the deck several times and thrown into the sea. In the endless cycle of reincarnation, this was a rather brain-burning piece of work. Jianghu didn't know why, but when he watched this horror movie, he felt that it was the scariest. Because of this, he was depressed for several days. He was afraid that one day, he would open his eyes and find that he had been hacked to death by his other self. Well, actually, it was just that he was a little crazy from watching movies. For a few days, Jianghu's condition was not very good. Fortunately, Jianghu's mental fortitude was strong enough, and he almost forgot about it after a few days. The small episode of the Hungry Ghost Festival passed by unknowingly. After the Hungry Ghost Festival, Taraga started to get busy because she was preparing to go to school. In fact, the end of August was very busy. For example, the grapes were ripe, and it was time to catch tuna. But the problem was that Jianghu was now busy with fishing missions in the manor every day. Who would catch tuna? In this way, before the tuna was caught, the grapes were ripe. Naturally, everyone was rushing to harvest the grapes. Jianghu was also the main force, but only 2 people had nothing to do with the grapes. One was Taraga, and the other was Qi Jia. After all, she still had to make up for classes. Under such circumstances, on September 1st, school started. Taraga also officially became a student of Winthrop High School. Early in the morning, Qi Jia and the others didn't go to the wine manor early to help. Instead, they dressed up Taraga. At this time, Taraga was like an American high school student. She wore a white chiffon shirt and a pair of slightly tight jeans, which perfectly outlined her curves. She wore a pair of Nike Air Mag shoes. Well, in fact, Jianghu originally wanted to buy these shoes. Everyone knew that Jianghu actually liked basketball. Although he didn't play anymore, he had collected a lot of sneakers in his house. These were called the strongest basketball shoes in the future. Jianghu also had them, but he had only worn them a few times. The inspiration for these sneakers came from a movie, From the Past to the Future. It was said that they were made to pay tribute to that movie. Although Jianghu hadn't seen it, it didn't stop him from buying it. This pair of shoes cost $5,000, so Jianghu bought it. Taraga, on the other hand, had lived in a tribe since she was a child. Her aesthetic point of view was different from that of the girls outside. For clothes, the most important thing was to be loose, sturdy, and breathable. As for shoes, she still liked to wear hiking shoes. However, Jianghu didn't let her wear them. When she looked at Jianghu's shoe cabinet, she liked this pair of shoes at first glance. Of course, Jianghu's shoes were definitely big for her. She had bought this pair with the pocket money Jianghu had given her. It could also be seen that Jianghu was quite generous with the money. $5,000 for a pair of shoes, and he bought it just like that. After dressing up, Taraga put on her shoulder bag and said goodbye to Jia and the others. She would come back in the evening. After she got into Jianghu's car, Jianghu started the engine and drove her to the town. "What's wrong? Are you nervous?" Seeing that Taraga was fidgeting in the passenger seat, Jianghu smiled and said to her. To be honest, Jianghu would never go to school again in his life, because he really didn't want to go to school. But that didn't stop him from finding Taraga's nervous look funny. It's okay." Wrinkling her nose at Jianghu, Taraga didn't feel uncomfortable. She smiled and said to Jianghu, "After you go to school, you can make some friends. Of course, you can't casually get a boyfriend. Don't forget, I won your virginity." Seeing that she was still a little nervous, Jianghu deliberately said with a straight face. However, he said this completely to relax. He didn't feel that way about Taraga. After hearing Jianghu's words, Taraga couldn't help but smile. She relaxed a lot, then she nodded very seriously. The more I talk about it, the more I feel that you're a bad student. But one last thing, don't get bullied in school. Kids at this age don't know how to control their strength. If anyone dares to bully you, hit them back. You should know that I'm a local tyrant in Winthrop. I'm already being fair to these people by not bullying them. If they dare to show off, teach them a good lesson. If they dare to bully you, don't mess with them." Seeing that Taraga relaxed a little, Jianghu also said calmly. He was like a typical Wuxia parent, a typical Wuxia parent in the Northeast. Most Wuxia parents took the middle road. Children naturally went to school to learn. Other than learning, they shouldn't have conflicts with other children. Fighting was also wrong. If other people hurt their children, they would feel sorry for them. If their children hurt other people's children, they would also feel sorry for them. They would feel sorry for the money spent on treating other people's children. However, in Jianghu's family, the education from a young age was that one couldn't suffer losses. If one didn't do well in the exam, he would naturally be beaten when he returned home. However, if he was beaten when he went out, he would still be beaten when he returned home. On the contrary, if he beat others back, he would be rewarded when he returned home. Therefore, Jianghu also followed his family's tradition and instilled in Taraga that if someone dared to bully her, she should go up and beat him up. No matter who he was, even if he was the king, Jianghu wouldn't be afraid. If there were boys who dared to be tough, Jianghu would teach them a lesson. If there were many people, the people in Jianghu's manor weren't to be trifled with. Hearing Jianghu's words, Taraga also nodded vigorously. In fact, she was also a little worried about this. Although Boston was not very strict about racial discrimination at the adult level, it was very serious among children, especially white people discriminating against people of color. This was very normal. Even society was tolerant of this phenomenon. The Stanford University sex case that made a lot of noise a while ago was a typical special case. It was said that a boy at Stanford saw a girl drinking too much and then picked up her corpse. If the same thing happened to a Wuxia or a black person, they wouldn't be able to escape 4 years in prison. However, the boy's parents wrote a letter to the judge, saying that their son had a bright future and couldn't be locked up in prison. Therefore, the 4-year sentence became 6 months. It was said that because of good behavior, he would be released in 3 months. This was a slap to the faces of many people who had been clamoring for the fairness of the American law in China. However, Jianghu didn't express any opinions when he saw it because in a sense, he was also a member of this privileged group. In the United States, black people, white people, and yellow people were all nonsense. In this seemingly free country, there were only two kinds of people, the rich and the poor. Fortunately, Jianghu was the former, so even if Taraga really did what he said and killed someone, Jianghu could guarantee that nothing would happen to her. At most, she would go to prison for a few days, and then do community service. Of course, it was just talk here. Jianghu was not the kind of person who liked to cause trouble. After instilling a lot of violent things in Taraga, Jianghu had unknowingly arrived in front of Winthrop High School. At this time, many cars had stopped in front of Winthrop High School. Jianghu did not use his privilege to block them. Instead, he parked the car far away, and then walked toward the school's main gate with Taraga. Along the way, many people recognized Jianghu and took the initiative to greet him. Jianghu also responded to them one by one. In the eyes of Winthrop people, he was the god of fortune and also a demon, but he was also an angel. As long as they didn't provoke him, Jianghu's temper was still very good. After greeting all the way, the two also came to the school gate. Chapter 791. Remember what I told you. If anyone dares to show off to you, you have to teach them a lesson. Do you hear me? Before Taraga entered the school, Jianghu purposely turned her head and spoke to her seriously. Okay, I'll remember. After hearing Jianghu's words, Taraga nodded vigorously and ran into the school with a smile. Looking at her figure, Jianghu also smiled. Ah, youth. I'd rather not reminisce about it. Go back and continue harvesting grapes. After seeing Taraga wave her hand and enter the crowd, Jianghu also looked at the time and prepared to go back and continue harvesting grapes. This year's grape harvest was almost 50% more than last year's. With 50% more grapes, he could make 50% more wine. All of this was money. Mr. Jianghu? Please wait a moment. Just as Jianghu was about to turn and leave, a feminine voice suddenly sounded. Then, Jianghu looked over and saw a white man about 1.8 meters tall running over with girlish steps. However, Jianghu didn't know what to do when he called out to him. This was because Jianghu also knew this person. This person was the vice principal and dean of Winthrop High School. Well, this high school was indeed relatively small, unlike the legendary high schools. Therefore, many teachers specialized in teaching for several years. This was also very normal. After all, this wasn't some aristocratic school. What's the matter, Teacher Fard? Jianghu stopped walking when he saw the person in front of him and asked in confusion. It's like this, Mr. Jiang. You know Boston, right? There's a Paul Pierce over there, you know, the one who plays basketball, you know. Hearing this guy keep saying, you know, right? Jianghu raised his eyebrows. What the hell was this? And he had to say it every half a sentence. Didn't he feel tired? Let him be a chatterbox. Well, can you get to the point? I still have a lot of things to do, so. Jianghu looked at the man in front of him. He pointed at his watch and said seriously. Okay, I'll get to the point right away. This Paul Pierce organizes a charity game every year. Although he doesn't play in Boston anymore, his home is still here. He still has a lot of influence. He invites some NBA players and celebrities to participate. Hearing him talking, Jianghu couldn't sit still anymore. Do you want me to donate some money? If it was for charity, then Jianghu was willing to donate some money. It was impossible to donate all of it, but it wouldn't be a problem to donate a few 100,000 or even 1,000,000 yuan. No. This charity game doesn't accept donations. The main purpose of this game is to make young people like basketball more, so he will find some high school stadiums. The money from the tickets will be donated directly to the high school. The place he finds will be the target of the donation. This year, he chose our school's stadium. Although it's not a lot of money, it's still an opportunity for exposure, so we agreed. However, there's an unwritten rule, and that is, the local team has to send a player. I remember that you used to be quite good at basketball, so can you represent Winthrop in this game? The vice principal looked at Jianghu with a hopeful expression. Indeed, Winthrop was not a town that liked basketball very much. In the eastern part of the United States, no, in the entire United States, basketball was not a very popular sport. The most popular sport here was football. Other than that, it was baseball. Basketball was easy to promote because it was simple. A flat field, a basketball rack, and a basketball could be played. Most importantly, one person could play it, 2 people could play it, 3 people could play it, 4 people could play it, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people could play it, and 12 people could play it on the same field. It was simple and convenient, so it was easy to promote. However, it was far from being popular. The people of Winthrop didn't like basketball very much. The highest level of competition in American high schools was the state level. Massachusetts was a small state to begin with. There were less than 35 towns and cities with high schools in their names. However, Winthrop's school team couldn't even get into the top 32 of the state. It could be said that they lived at the bottom of the food chain. It was easy to form a football team in Winthrop, but it was too difficult to form a basketball team. Jianghu was rumored to be a good player and was almost signed by the Boston Celtics. Therefore, he looked for Jianghu and hoped that Jianghu could represent their school. After hearing what he said, Jianghu should not have agreed. After all, he was scolded badly the last time he played basketball. However, they were all from the same village, so Jianghu could not reject them directly. He could only go back and think about it. Then I'll go back and think about it. When is the game? Jianghu asked the vice principal in front of him. September 7th and 15th. They will report to the team, so the game is September 13th. Hearing Jianghu's words, the vice principal immediately said. Hearing what he said, Jianghu nodded, indicating that he understood. Then, he returned to his car and drove back. After he parked his car in the courtyard, he didn't relax today. Instead, he washed his face and went to his wine manor. When he arrived, he found that as long as it was the people in his manor, they had nothing to do. They were all busy here. It was quite lively. After Jianghu came over, everyone greeted Jianghu. Then Jianghu put on gloves. He was not good at cutting grapes, and he could easily damage the main vine. So his job last year was to carry grapes. With his strength, there was no problem at all. It was the same this year. After putting on gloves, Jianghu walked to a full basket and used his arms. The basket that usually took 2 people to carry was very stable in Jianghu's hands. In fact, this basket was about 50 kilograms. If it were not for fear of spilling, Jianghu could carry 8 or 9 baskets by himself. But from this, it could be seen that the strength of the women in Jianghu's manor was not small. The 2 of them carried 50 kilograms of things back and forth so many times, but they did not feel tired. Indeed, under the circumstances of absorbing spirit energy and eating well. These women's strength was not small, especially those who often exercised. For example, Chi Jia could now bench press 160 kilograms and push 15 people. This was already stronger than most men. However, the muscles on her body were not explosive, but streamlined and very good-looking. Of course, this was also because they did not eat protein powder. Unknowingly, the morning's work was finished. With the addition of Jianghu, the speed was faster. We're all experienced this year, so our harvest speed is much faster than expected. We should finish harvesting around the 3rd or 4th of July. As for the remaining grapes, let's leave them for a while longer. We'll harvest them after the winter frost and use them to make ice wine. Looking at the grapevines in front of him, Dulles Gerard could not help but smile and say to Jianghu beside him. These were all money, he was very sure. After hearing his words, Jianghu also smiled. Yes, these were all money. Lowering his head, Jianghu ate a piece of beef and took a bite of a steamed bun. His eyes also narrowed. Eating after working really tasted good. Around 11:30 in the afternoon, it was time to rest. Jianghu and the others had lunch. Naturally, it was not as sumptuous as usual. They just ate a simple bite. After all, everyone was very tired. Lunch was prepared by Chia with Delina and Marian in advance. It was basically very simple food. A large pot of beef stewed with potatoes was stewed. Americans like to eat stewed potatoes very much. As long as there was stewed potatoes, there was nothing they did not like. A large pot of quite thick beef stewed with potatoes, plus a large pot of stir-fried rape roasted potatoes. The rape mentioned here was not the kind of rapeseed from the south, but the rapeseed from the north. In the south, it was also called ladle white. After being fried with oil, the taste of the potatoes was quite good. Jianghu usually liked to eat it. In addition to these two dishes, there was also a large pot of vegetables and fruit salad, which was also considered as dessert after the meal. The staple food was a large basket of white bread and a basket of steamed buns. They could eat whatever they liked. After lunch, everyone sat together and chatted for a while. After resting for a while, they got up again and began to cut grapes. Then, they were busy for the whole afternoon. As time went by, it was past 4 in the afternoon. Everyone tidied up their tired mood and returned to the villa. Galina left early because she had to pick up Taraga from school. During dinner in the evening, everyone was asking Taraga about the school. Taraga was also very excited and kept talking about the school. And it seemed that she was really popular. On the first day of school, she made 2 friends. One was a somewhat cowardly white girl, and the other was also a colored person, who was the white girl's neighbor. Chapter 792. She's afraid of everything: rats, cockroaches, snakes, insects. So she's always been bullied by bad boys. Her parents are doctors, and she has a good personality, but she's very timid. When their daughter gets bullied, they can't do anything except sigh at home. Fortunately, Pearl's personality is similar to mine. She likes to fight for justice. They're neighbors, and their relationship has always been good. At the dinner table, Taraga kept talking about her classmates. One of the 2 protagonists in her story was Bessie Oliver, a white girl. She was timid and pretty, so she was often bullied by bad boys. The other one was Pearl Circe, a black girl. When Jianghu heard this, he thought of another black girl named Circe. That person was called Hodge Circe, and he sold parts in a shop in Winthrop. He didn't know if the 2 were related. If they were, then it would be too much of a coincidence. Okay, we know you're excited, but you should go take a bath now, and then go back to sleep. Looking at Taraga, who had been talking, Chi Jia glanced at the time. Unknowingly, it was almost 9 o'clock. For other people, they had to go to bed early. They still had work tomorrow, and Taraga also had school tomorrow. After hearing Chi Jia's words, everyone smiled and responded. After clearing the table together, the group walked to the hot spring. Since Jianghu's hot spring was created, it really played a big role. In the winter, they didn't want to come out to take a bath, but the hot spring water could be directly brought home. Now that they could take a bath, they directly came here to soak. It was really a very enjoyable thing. After Jianghu and the others walked here, they went into their own rooms. After changing his clothes, Jianghu also came to his bathroom. He washed his hair first, then simply used a bath gel. After washing the mud and dust off his body, he slowly walked into the stone hot spring. When the warm water filled his mouth, Jianghu's face showed a hint of enjoyment. It was really very comfortable. Leaning his head on the stone, Jianghu closed his eyes. Jianghu's hot spring was made of stone. Of course, on the side of the stone, there was still a cement base, but the top layer was made of stone. Don't think that his hot spring was a simple stone pool. Under Jianghu's hot spring, he made a perfect waterproof and water circulation treatment. Water will constantly come out of the spring, and then the water will flow into the stone pool. When the water reaches the stone, it will flow to the side of the drain, and then after a cycle, the impurities inside will be filtered, and then discharged into the artificial river next to the pool. In this way, it would not be wasted, and it was very clean. As for the hot spring water connected to the house, it was another line. It was not Jianghai's bathwater. Jianghai had already considered this when he built it. Feeling the water flow outside his body, Jianghai closed his eyes. He was busy today, and he did not have the leisure and time to think about the problem that the vice principal said to him today. Playing basketball. To be honest, this was a good place to slap his face and pretend to be a hero. But the problem was that Jianghai did not know whether he should go or not. Recalling the time when he went to play basketball and was scolded miserably, Jianghai still wiped his face. "Forget it, I won't go." With a soft sigh, Jianghai whispered. "What do you mean you won't go?" But at this moment, a voice sounded from the side. Jianghai looked back and found that Feng Yunshan had walked into the bathroom on his side. At this time, she was wrapped in a bath towel, her long hair was hanging down, and she was wearing a pair of cute pink slippers on her feet. Then she walked in just like that. Facing Jianghai's gaze, she walked to Jianghai's side and untied the bath towel. In an instant, her graceful figure appeared in front of Jianghai. To be honest, Jianghai and Feng Yunshan had known each other for a long time, but for now, her status in the manor was only a little higher than Aphrodite's. Usually, Jianghai did not care about this, but now when the two were facing each other, Jianghai really did not know how to feel about Feng Yunshan. But Feng Yunshan did not know this at this time. She just let out a sigh of relief and slowly slid down to sit beside Jianghai. "Why are you here?" Looking at Feng Yunshan beside him, Jianghai naturally wrapped his arms around her, and then with a little force, he hugged her to his body. His head rested on Feng Yunshan's shoulder, and his hands wrapped around her lower abdomen, so that her butt and his thighs were completely pressed together. Feng Yunshan did not care about Jianghai's actions. Instead, she enjoyed it very much. "I missed you, so I came to see you. It seems that we haven't been alone for a long time." Turning her head and glancing at Jianghai, Feng Yunshan said with a smile. After that, she turned her body and hugged Jianghai. Feeling this fragrant jade in his arms, Jianghai almost went berserk, but fortunately, after hearing her words, he endured it. I don't know what to say." Hearing her words, Jianghai scratched his head helplessly because he didn't know what to say. He really didn't think that he would provoke so many women. But now that he had provoked them, he didn't know what to say, especially when his woman talked about this topic. "Well, I know you don't know how to refuse, and the most important thing is that you have become like this. It seems that I have some problems too." Looking at Jianghai's somewhat overwhelmed look, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but smile and say to him. Because in fact, she was the one who introduced Ai Xiaoxi to Jianghai, and she even took the initiative to send Ai Xiaoxi to Jianghai's bed. At the beginning, she really didn't like Jianghai. She was with Jianghai at the beginning. In fact, one was to solve the physiological problems she also needed, and the other was to find a spare tire. After all, she couldn't always follow an old man. It's just that after finding Jianghai, she found that Jianghai was really a perfect lover. He was perfect in that aspect, had money, and a good character. In this case, she was thinking about how to maintain Jianghai as a lover. So she came over to take photos, and then introduced Ai Xiaoxi to Jianghai to maintain Jianghai. However, as the time they spent together grew longer and longer, people's hearts were made of flesh. Things like feelings would indeed slowly breed. There was an old saying that said, "Love grows with time." No matter how you understood this sentence was slowly taking root and sprouting in Feng Yunshan's heart. "It's just us now, or we." Feeling Feng Yunshan's body and the true feelings she revealed, Jianghai couldn't help but hug her back. His eyes stared at her like this, and the meaning was already obvious. "Not now. It's us tonight. Why are you in such a hurry? I just want to talk to you properly." Hearing Jianghai's words, Feng Yunshan was indeed a little lost for a moment, but she quickly reacted. Although she also wanted to, she knew her situation. If she couldn't help but cry out, it would be embarrassing. so it's better to go back to the room first. But she felt the change in Jianghu under the water, and she couldn't help but blush. She knew that she had to divert Jianghu's attention at this time. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to control Jianghu later. By the way, when I came in, I heard you say something about not going? Looking at Jianghu, Feng Yunshan asked a little strangely. Oh, I sent Taraga to school today. Their vice principal told me that their school had NBA players who came to organize a charity game. I'm also a local celebrity, so he asked me to be a player and participate. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jianghu shrugged. It doesn't matter if he tells them about it. Then if you have nothing to do, you can go. This is a good opportunity to show your face. Hearing Jianghu's words, she just wants Jianghu to play basketball. It's not for winning or anything. If he wants to play, then go. Hasn't Jianghu been working on his exposure in Winthrop recently? Why not go? I'm a little scared. Last time, I just went for a physical test and I was scolded by a lot of people. If I go to play basketball this time, TSK. Shaking his head, Jianghu is really a little guilty. He doesn't know what to do. Hey, what are you worried about? You're not going to play professionally. You're just going to participate in a charity game. You're going to show off and then run away. What a good theme, isn't it? Hearing Jianghu's words, Feng Yunshan smiled and said with a smile. Hearing what she said, Jianghu was stunned for a moment, then touched his chin. Is this really a good idea? Don't worry, if you want to go, then go. If you don't want to go, then don't go. No one can control you. Really, anyway, you're not really going to play professionally, hee. Hearing Jianghu's words, Feng Yunshan also said with a smile. Thank you for helping me make up my mind. I have to thank you properly. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jianghu couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Oh, I always like to scare myself. I really like sports. Since I'm playing this and not going to play professionally, what's there to worry about? Thinking of this, Jianghu also carried Feng Yunshan out of the water and looked at her with a smile. You let go. I will moan when I do that. Patting Jianghu's mouth, Feng Yunshan naturally knew what Jianghu was going to do. She blushed and said to Jianghu. Then let them listen. Following Jianghu's sinister smile, the battle began. Chapter 793. Pa, I haven't played for a long time, I don't know if I can still play. After patting the basketball on the floor, Jianghu muttered in a low voice. Then, his eyes turned cold, and he focused his attention on the opposite basket. After Feng Yunshan talked to Jianghu that night, when Jianghu went to send Taraga to school the next day, he told the vice principal that he would be there and that he would be a local Winthrop. After getting Jianghu's affirmation, the vice principal was also very excited. This time, there were a total of 3 people from Winthrop participating in this charity game. One was Jianghu, and the other 2 were from the school team. After confirming that Jianghu would participate, the vice principal was relieved. The vice principal finally felt relieved. Jianghu spent the next few days in the vineyard busily working. Finally, Jianghu and the others harvested all the grapes that should be harvested yesterday. There were about 2 acres of grapes left, which were to be used to make ice wine. After Jianghu and the others had a good night's rest, the person who sent Taraga to school this morning was Jialina. After eating breakfast and walking around, Jianghu came to his warehouse. It was the one that was transformed into a basketball stadium. Although he had never paid attention to this place, it was still very good. After opening the door and letting the smell out, Jianghu fetched water and wiped the court. Then, he went to get a basketball. After playing for a while and changing his clothes, Jianghu was ready to try it out. Jianghu stepped on his favorite LeBron James 10th generation sneakers. Jianghu likes to buy sneakers, but some sneakers are for everyday wear, not for playing games. For example, all kinds of sprays. Psychic Boy, Galaxy Sprays, Joe 28 and so on. Jiang Hai naturally bought the authentic ones, and they were for him to wear. But the price, hee. His most expensive pair of sneakers was probably the Air Mag, which cost $5,000 a pair. When he bought the Psychic Boy, he specially went to Nike's official store and spent a lot of money to order it. It only cost $2,000 a pair. In fact, sneakers in the United States were much cheaper than expected. Compared to China, there was a big gap. For example, the Kobe series and LeBron James series were just new models, which were sold for $180. LeBron 10, KD, Kevin Durant 5, Kobe 7, and so on were sold for $180. The Kobe 8 and John 11 were sold for $200. The most expensive ordinary sneaker was the Kobe 9, $225, the high top. The most expensive sneaker was the Jordan 28, at $250. It was not as expensive as Wuxia's. It was at least 20% cheaper. Of course, it was the most ordinary sneakers, not limited edition or commemorative sneakers. Therefore, after Jiang Hai came here, he bought a lot of sneakers in order to fulfill his dream of sneakers. But in actual combat, he still liked the LeBron system the most. The quality of the shoes was not bad, but the quality of the shoes was not bad. First of all, Jiang Hai's feet were a bit wide, and the shoes were quite comfortable to walk on. Air Max technology was also his favorite. After testing the feeling of his feet, Jiang Hai took a deep breath and quickly dribbled a few times. Then, he ran towards the basket. The last time he played basketball was when he was still a beginner. At that time, he was already very good. He could jump from the three-point line and dunk. He never missed a shot. Otherwise, those people in Boston would not have specially wanted to sign Jiang Hai after the physical test. But Jiang Hai was not crazy. He was not crazy. Why would he sign a contract with those guys to play basketball? How much did the best NBA players earn in a year? Tens of millions of dollars. Jiang Hai earned more in a year than they earned in their entire professional career. Of course, this included the other players' professional salaries, endorsements, and so on. Even if they were all added together, they would not earn as much as Jiang Hai. Therefore, Jiang Hai did not even think about it and directly rejected it. If such an opportunity was given to him again, he would still reject it. He was not short of money, and he was not stupid. Was he sick in the head to fight with these players for food? Regardless of whether he went to the professional league or not, he had to give it a try. After quickly dribbling the ball past the free throw line, Jiang Hai instantly put the ball away. Then, he jumped up with a bang. Originally, he wanted to do a simple dunk to see how high he could jump. But after jumping up, he realized that he was thinking too much, because he jumped too high. With a bang, by the time he reacted, the basket had already appeared at his waist and he was still rising quickly. This time, Jiang Hai probably only used 70% of his strength. But by the time he reacted, his feet were already on the top edge of the backboard, so he took a step in the air, stepped on the top edge of the backboard, and squatted down. He really didn't think, how could he be so terrifying? If I jump with all my strength now, I can jump almost 4 meters off the ground. No, it should be at least 4.5 meters. F***ck, it seems that I am becoming less and less human. Looking at the standard backboard under his feet, Jiang Hai could not help but click his tongue. This was one of the reasons why he could not play in the NBA. It was too amazing. What if the government wanted to cut him up and study him? After jumping off the backboard again, Jiang Hai started to try. He took off from the free throw line with 50% of his strength. No, his butt was over the top of the backboard. 30%, no, his butt was over the basket. Finally, Jiang Hai tried. 15%. Yes, this was not bad. It was probably his chin over the basket. This was okay. Dunking from the three-point line required 20% of his strength. Below the basket, 5% to 10% was enough. After spending the whole afternoon, Jiang Hai tested his ability to dunk. After making sure that there were no problems, Jianghu let out a long sigh of relief. It seems that his physical fitness is too strong, and he can't play basketball. His original decision was correct. After having lunch at noon, Jianghu continued to practice in the afternoon. However, this time, he practiced dribbling and shooting. Jianghu found that although his physical fitness had improved, his shooting accuracy had not decreased. It was still so good that it made people's hair stand on end. In the past, he had a 100% shooting accuracy in the half court. Now, in the whole court, it was still 100%. If the rules allowed it, he could even directly throw the ball in from the baseline, no matter how far it was. At the same time, he found that when he used to play basketball, he could only throw the ball in one position, which was the proper shooting position. When he threw the ball in other positions, his accuracy was not very good. Now, however, he could throw the ball in any way he wanted. As long as he wanted, he could kick the ball into the basket. Moreover, it was a clean basket. This is too abnormal. Looking at his hand, Jianghu did not know what others thought. Anyway, he did not want to play anymore. This was too much of a bully. It was just like when playing a game. It might be fun to use a little cheating device, but when it was used as a cheating device to become invincible, it wasn't fun anymore. At least, that was what Jianghu thought now. Therefore, after practicing for a while in the afternoon, Jianghu went back. At the same time, he secretly made up his mind. This time, he was going to pretend to be 13. After that, he ran away and solved it cleanly. Why are you back so early? Aren't you going to practice basketball? When Jianghu came back, it was only 3:00 in the afternoon. Seeing that Jianghu came back, Jia could not help but ask with some doubts. She had been busy these days. While she was busy picking grapes, she was also busy taking care of Taraga's homework. Fortunately, elementary school and junior high school in the United States were basically playing. Therefore, Taraga did not fall too badly in the curriculum, but she still fell behind. As the person with the highest academic qualifications here, Jia was naturally responsible for her homework. As for Delina and Marian, after a month of learning, they now felt a headache when they read books. Jianghu had to sigh. Although they were nominally his daughters, in fact, they were very similar to him. Jianghu was the kind of person who was not stupid, but he really could not learn. When he saw books, he would feel a headache. Hey, basketball is too simple. When the time comes, you can watch your husband go and kill everyone. Hearing her words, Jianghu smiled casually, sat beside her, and said with a proud face. Bah, shameless, whose husband are you? Also, don't think that I don't know that basketball is easy to get started, but it is not easy to play well. Your physical fitness is good, but it is not at the level where you can beat those professional players. I heard from Taraga that this time, there will be many professional players coming. Looking at Jianghu in front of her, Jia wrinkled her nose and said to him. Hearing her words, Jianghu just smiled. No matter who comes, he is very confident in himself. With the 2 moves in the training just now, he is already invincible. Well, you will know when the time comes. Watch how I fly to the sky and stand side by side with the sun. Hearing her words, Jianghu said with a smile, but just as he was about to boast again, someone patted his shoulder. After turning his head, he found that the person who patted him was not someone else, but Chia. No matter how you fly, you'd better get me some pork now. I want to make double-cooked pork tonight. Hearing Chia's words, Jianghu jumped up from the sofa instantly. Double-cooked pork is his favorite dish. Wait for me, I will be back soon. Chapter 794. For the next few days, Jianghu's daily life was almost the same. He basically returned to his original life. Every morning, he would get up and walk around. Then he would come back for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and so on. Was there something strange mixed in at the end? Jianghu wasn't sure, but he liked this kind of life. Jianghai's life was really simple. Others lived according to the day, wishing that they could have a new way of living every second. There was no other way, the pressure was too great. They had to hurry up, but Jianghai basically lived according to the month. This was because Jianghai's matters were basically arranged according to the month. According to his plan for next year. Well, it was only early September this year, but he was already thinking about next year. January was the time to plant seaweed. Since Jianghai's manor had more sea areas, naturally, he wanted to increase the spiritual qi in these sea areas. Naturally, seaweed was indispensable. It could be planted in January or December. Jianghai estimated that he would start planting it in December this year. In February, it was the time to plant fish food and vegetables. The fish food was the small mullet and octopus larvae. The vegetables were naturally the vegetables to be eaten this year. In the United States, vegetables were much more expensive than meat. In March, it was the time to plant fish fry and fruit. Jianghai also planted a lot of fruit in the manor. As for the fish fry, this year, Jianghai and Edward Anderson had a discussion. They directly got some good fish fry and raised them. He didn't want to raise American red fish anymore. He wanted to raise some good fish. Atlantic salmon was a must. After all, it was very expensive. The grouper also needed to be raised. Jianghai even contacted Porter and Eva. He had to admit that this guy had a few tricks up his sleeve. He even managed to get mouse spots. Mouse spots were called groupers, but in fact, they weren't groupers. They were a kind of humpback bass. They were only distributed in the Western Pacific Ocean, but Porter and Eva had some connections with a fishing company in Hong Kong. Of course, the price was more expensive than in Wuxia, but Jianghai didn't care. Jianghai had spent a lot of money on Porter and Eva in the past 2 years. This guy was also an enterprising person. Over the years, he had contacted a lot of suppliers outside. Now, he could almost get all the expensive aquatic products. In fact, these expensive aquatic products were prepared for Jianghai. Jianghai was naturally very happy about this. The last time he went to the pier in Boston, he met with Terry and Eva. He also gave Jianghai a list of the fish seedlings that he could get now. Almost all the seedlings that Jianghai wanted to get, he had them here. Jianghai and Edward Anderson discussed the types of fish fry to buy next year. They were Atlantic salmon, grouper, dragon, mouse spot, spotted shrimp, king crab, geoduck clam, and deep-sea spiny dragon specially imported from Australia. In addition to the fish that Jianghai originally had in the sea, Jianghai's seafood next year was bound to be abundant. In April, there was originally a beef show, but he had to consider whether to participate next year. In late April and early May, there was a wine show, but Jianghai had to consider whether to participate or not. After all, he had been to Europe and so on. Even if he were to participate, he would probably let Dulles Gerard lead the team. In May, June, and July, nothing happened. In early August it was the day to fish for tuna, but he did not fish this year. There were plenty of tuna in his sea, and he was too lazy to fish outside. In late August, the grapes were ripe again. In late August and early September, it was time to harvest the grapes and make wine. However, this had nothing to do with him. Then, around mid-September, he would buy cattle. Jianghai had also discussed this with Robbins Garcia. Because the cattle in their manor were basically Angus cattle, Jianghai did not buy large beef cattle. Anyway, he was now making money by selling grass. His beef cattle would not exceed 30,000 in the end, so it was quite good. After October, until January of the next year, Jianghai would be in a state where nothing happened. Indeed, other people would plan according to the day. What to do today, what to do tomorrow. Jianghai planned directly according to the month, and in a year, there would be half a year when he would be in a state of not doing anything. If it was an ordinary person who could not stand being lonely, they would have looked for something to do long ago. Those who could do serious things would do serious things, such as investing, trading in stocks, starting a business. Those who had nothing to do would also look for excitement, pick up girls, go racing, go to nightclubs, travel. Who would be like Jianghu, just lying at home like this? It was really boring. But Jianghu himself didn't feel bored. This was enough for him. Nowadays, there were more people who were bored than he imagined. In the most popular live broadcast in the country, there were tens of thousands of people watching a live broadcast of someone sleeping. Wasn't this boring enough? Fortunately, Taraga's school found something for Jianghu to do. On the morning of September 7th, Jianghu and Taraga went to school together. Today was supposed to be a rest day, but almost all the students in the school came because their school had a basketball game, which was quite eye-catching. Naturally, Jianghu also came with Taraga. Besides Taraga, almost all the women in Jianghu's manor came, including Valentina and Alfred. Only Biyao was still busy in Boston. Fortunately, Jianghu had enough cars. Everyone drove over and there was still room for them to sit down. After getting out of the car, Taraga took everyone to visit the school. Only Jianghu was pulled to their basketball stadium by their sissy vice principal. Don't get me wrong. Jianghu was very straight, straighter than a steel bar. Therefore, he was pulled over just to discuss the game in a while. Jianghu didn't care much about it. Instead, it was the high school students from the two school teams who were very nervous. As for whether they had any fantasies or not, Jianghu didn't know. Anyway, when he was in high school, he was quite a chinibu. Jianghu didn't know. Anyway, when he was in high school, he was quite chinibu. While they were discussing, the NBA star team had already arrived outside the high school by bus. Hey, Paul, it seems that you're quite famous here. Along with the arrival of the bus, many students and people who had heard of the news gathered at the school gate. When they saw the people inside the bus, many of them screamed. Hearing the screams, a big black guy sitting in the bus couldn't help but say to a middle-aged man who was sitting in the front, "Hey, Paul, it seems that you're quite famous here." This middle-aged man was no other than an NBA All-Star player. He was once the top player in Boston, Truth Paul Pierce. At this time, he was also waving to the people outside. His reputation in Boston was extremely famous. Although he doesn't play in Boston anymore, his influence in Boston is undeniable. The love for players and teams in the United States and Wuxia was different. In the United States, everyone liked the team, and then they liked the star of the team. In Wuxia, everyone liked the star, and then they liked the team. Therefore, generally speaking, if a star player changed teams, it would not cause any waves in Wuxia. Those who liked him would still like him, and those who disliked him would still dislike him. However, in the United States, generally, a star player changing teams would cause a huge backlash. They would directly burn the jerseys and so on. It was clear that they were quite disgusted with such traitors. However, no one cared whether Paul Pierce was still in Boston or not. When he left, a lot of people were sad, but there were very few people who scolded him because he had given almost 90% of his career to Boston. He had also brought a championship ring with him. At the end of the year, when he left in search of a championship ring, no one cared about that. On the contrary, there were more people who scolded the general manager. Therefore, although he had left, there were still many local supporters. His name was still very famous. This year, like previous years, when he came back to organize the game, there were still many people who responded. Paul is the symbol here, just like I am in Atlanta. At this time, another black man next to him said with a smile. Hearing his words, many people here could not help but make a tisk sound. You will be beaten up in Atlanta now, Joseph. Looking at the man in front of him, the black man with the explosive hair said with a smile. You say it as if you won't be beaten up in Dallas. However, the man named Joseph was not someone to be trifled with. After hearing the black man with the explosive hair, he immediately retorted. The man also curled his lips. He was not going to be stubborn about this. Hearing this, the people in the car could not help but laugh a few times, but they did not comment. Well, brothers, we are here. Don't embarrass yourself later, understand? At this moment, the bus also slowly stopped. Paul Pierce, who was sitting at the front, stood up immediately and said to the people in the bus with a hoarse voice. After hearing his words, the people in the bus naturally cheered excitedly. Okay, get off the bus. Seeing that everyone was in a good state, Paul Pierce was the first to get off the bus. As they began to get off the bus, the security guards hired by the school immediately formed a human wall so that they could walk down safely. The fans waiting in front of the bus couldn't help but scream. Hearing these screams, these people also walked down with a smile. Almost every person who got off the bus would cause the audience to cheer. For them, these guys who appeared on TV were going to perform for them today. For the fans, just thinking about it made them very excited. Chapter 795. Wow, 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 it's really an NBA star. Oh my God, that's Paul Pierce, that's Josh Smith. And Avery Bradley, that's Evan Turner. And Isaiah Thomas, oh, that's DeAndre Jordan. Many of the onlookers were NBA fans, although the NBA was not the most popular among the 4 major leagues in North America. But as long as it was a sport, there would naturally be a lot of fans. The people here all liked basketball. DeAndre Jordan, didn't he make a scene this year? Hearing this, a good friend next to him could not help but whisper. The biggest news of the summer was DeAndre Jordan's departure and return. From a legal point of view, there was nothing wrong with him. But from a moral point of view, he had indeed cheated the Mavericks. Hey, that's all business. Hearing his good friend's words, the person who was scolding Jordan in front of the computer suddenly became his supporter and screamed loudly. The tall and long-armed DeAndre Jordan reached out and high-fived him. He immediately gained another fan. He had to admit that this young man was really easy to buy. Hello, everyone. Looking at the excited crowd here, Paul Pierce also said loudly. Then he walked forward, waving his hand vigorously, greeting the crowd as he walked into the stadium in the distance. With the arrival of these people, the other players also came. This was a charity game. Although there was no winner and it was a performance, the number of people still had to be gathered. According to the rules of the game, there had to be 10 people on each side. At the same time, there were 3 referees. The referees were naturally found by Paul Pierce. The players were basically all found by him. There were a total of 6 NBA players. 3 of them were Boston Celtics players, Evan Turner, Avery and Bradley, and Isaiah Thomas. These 3 were currently the outside core of the Celtics, but because they were relatively young, they were not very famous. The other 3 were Paul Pierce's teammates on the Clippers. They were him, Josh Smith, and DeAndre Jordan. Normally, all-star level players like Jordan wouldn't participate in a charity match like this. Basically, only some old guys or rookies would participate. The only reason he came was because he was a little blind this summer. Right now, he was trying to gain popularity everywhere. Otherwise, when this year's All-Star voting started, he would really be finished. The 6 players were naturally mixed in between the 2 teams. In addition, they also found 4 players who played in the NBDL. With this opportunity to brush up on the good impression of the absolute main force of these teams, these players were also very happy. In addition, there were a few university students and some members of society. However, these members of society obviously knew Paul Pierce. It seemed that they also knew that his skills were not very good. These university students were all local Boston University students. There were many famous universities in Boston, but none of them were famous basketball schools. The only one with some records was Boston College, but that was the NCAA's business. It had nothing to do with Jianghu and the others who were far away from their careers. After everyone arrived, Paul Pierce also gathered everyone together and prepared to talk about the teams. But before they could be divided, Avery and Bradley, who had met Jianghu a few times, came directly to Jianghu's side. Hey, Paul, I want to be with this guy. Looking at Paul Pierce, Avery and Bradley couldn't help but shout. What the hell? Do you know each other? Hearing his words, Paul Pierce frowned and asked with some doubts. Hey, of course, this is Jiang. He is very famous in Winthrop. Don't look at his young age. He earns more than all of us combined. Hearing Paul Pierce's words, Avery and Bradley couldn't help but say with a smile. Well, then it's up to you. Hearing Avery and Bradley's words, Paul Pierce shrugged indifferently. In his view, Avery chose to follow Jianghu, nothing more than to be more familiar with Jianghu. As he said, Jianghu is a rich man. When he came in, the vice principal had already introduced Jianghu to him. For players like them, there are only benefits and no disadvantages to knowing a rich man. He was also willing to see Bradley with some Jianghu, but what he didn't know was that Bradley was actually going to suck up to him. Soon, the 20 people here were divided into teams. On Jianghu's side, there were him, Avery and Bradley, Josh Smith, Evan Turner, a high school student, 2 NBDL players, a person from the underworld, and 2 NCAA players, forming a team of 10 people. On the opposite side were Paul Pierce, DeAndre Jordan, and Isaiah Thomas, plus a high school student, 2 people from the underworld, 2 NBDL players, and 2 NCAA players. After the teams were divided, the 2 teams began to study the lineup for the game. At the request of Avery and Bradley, Jianghu was arranged to be the starting point guard. He played as the shooting guard, the all-around Evan Turner played as the shooting guard, and he played as the small forward. Josh Smith was the only person on the field who could carry DeAndre Jordan. He could only play as the center, and a big man who looked very handsome in the NCAA played as the power forward. After choosing the players, Jianghu and the others also began to practice and familiarize themselves with the rules of the game. Because it was a charity game, both sides had unlimited substitutions and unlimited timeouts. A game was divided into 2 halves, with a 10-minute break in the middle and a 20-minute half. After communicating with the 3 referees, the security guards let out the security guards. The school's security guards also began to let people in. Soon, a lot of people came in. Naturally, the women in Jianghu's house also squeezed in. They all piled up behind Jianghu's team. Wow, I didn't expect this small place to attract so many beautiful women. So many beautiful women. I'm a little excited. Looking at the beautiful women sitting behind his lineup, the girls from Jianghu's family, Josh Smith's eyes suddenly widened. Then he gently elbowed DeAndre Jordan next to him and whispered with a smile. After all, the 2 of them were now on the same team. Their usual relationship was naturally closer than his teammates today, the few Celtics players. It would be another matter during the game later, but for now, they were still together. Hey, they're sitting there to watch my performance. TSK, Josh, you have to remember to get out of the way in a while. Otherwise, don't blame me if you get caught. Looking at the girls over there, DeAndre Jordan deliberately made a muscular gesture. Sure enough, Chi Jia and the others saw it and couldn't help laughing together. In fact, they were laughing at this guy for looking like a fool, but this guy thought that they were attracted to him. Although it may not be good to say this, you're probably going to be disappointed. Those girls are Mr. Zhang's womenfolk. Hearing their words, the high school student from DeAndre Jordan's team came over and said to them. You just said, us? Hearing his words, the 2 people on this side couldn't help but be stunned, and then asked with some doubts. Yeah, they're all in that area. Hearing their words, the high school student gestured. In fact, this matter was not a secret in Winthrop. Everyone knew that the people in Jianghu's manor were actually Jianghu's mistresses. Damn, evil tycoon, doesn't he know that bigamy is illegal in the United States? Hearing the high school student's words, little Jordan couldn't help but curse. He was originally prepared to perform well in a while and see if he could take one away tonight. Now, the famous girl is taken. Of course, he didn't think about the problem of loosening the soil. If it was in Los Angeles, maybe he would have the courage to steal, but where is this? This is Winthrop, and Jianghu is the richest man in Winthrop. He doesn't believe that if he dares to mess around, he will be able to get on the plane back to Los Angeles tomorrow. The problem is that the strong dragon can't suppress the local snake. The problem is that he is talking about the strong dragon. His little Jordan is just a little frog. When the frog meets the snake, it just prays that the snake ignores it. How dare he take the initiative to show off? Although he looks big and tall, in fact, this guy's brain is still very good. Otherwise, his shadow would not be everywhere this summer, but it is inevitable that he is unhappy. In a while, I'll give him a few good shots to vent my anger. Hearing little Jordan's muttering, Josh Smith was also helpless. He thought that these girls were here to see him, but now it seems that they are here to see Jianghu. However, he and Jianghu are teammates, so it is not easy for him to take action, but little Jordan can. Watch me. Little Jordan, who is also full of anger, also whispered. At this time, the warm-up time is over and the game begins. With the whistle of the referee, the starting players on both sides are called to the middle. After standing separately, Josh Smith and little Jordan also came to the center circle, ready to jump the ball. Toot! With the whistle of the referee, the basketball has been thrown into the air. Little Jordan and Josh Smith also jumped up at the first time and shot the basketball in the air with their hands. And Jianghu watched the two rise, his eyes also looked at the basketball in front of him. Pretentious, cough, the game has begun. Chapter 796. Josh Smith, when he was young, was known as Little Howard, in terms of physical fitness. When he first entered the league, he was a famous jumper. His physical fitness was very strong, but his offense was quite unstable. However, his defensive and blocking abilities were quite outstanding when he was young. He still held the record of being the youngest player in the NBA to block 10 shots in a game. In addition, he was also the youngest player to block 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, and 1,000 shots. He was the 2005 Slam Dunk champion, the 2005 Best Rookie, and the 2009 Best Defensive Team. It could be said that he had the strength of an all-star, but he had never been on the all-star team. His best days were when he was with the Hawks. At that time, he was ranked among the best in the entire league. His defensive ability, strong physical fitness, and shooting range that extended beyond the three-point line were quite outstanding. However, it was a pity that his offense was quite unstable. It was sometimes good and sometimes bad. As he grew older, his physical fitness deteriorated, and his ability continued to decline. However, when he was with the Rockets last year, he suddenly broke out in the Western Conference semifinals. When the Clippers were leading 3-1, he helped the Rockets win 3 games in a row. In the end, he did not let Paul touch the floor of Western Conference. Although he quickly disappeared after entering the finals of the Western Conference, his reputation had spread far and wide. This year, the Clippers recruited him. Together with Paul Pierce, they wanted to compete for the championship. Because he was a new addition, he got along well with Paul Pierce on the team. In addition, there were some problems with his attitude when he played, especially when it came to training. Therefore, when Paul Pierce said that he was going to play in the charity game, he came. Besides him, the only other person on the Clippers who came with him was little Jordan, who was eager to increase his reputation. However, even after saying so many good things about Josh, it did not change the fact that he could not beat little Jordan. In the air, little Jordan flicked his wrist and sent the basketball to his side. Although Isaiah Thomas was used more as a sixth man in the previous seasons, in this year's playoffs, he proved his strength. He averaged 17.5 points, 7 assists, and 3 rebounds per game. He proved to the world that his name was not for nothing. According to Boston, he should be the starting point guard of the team next year. At that time, his stats would explode again. Of course, with Boston's defense-oriented attitude, even if it exploded, it wouldn't blow up much. However, there was no doubt about his strength. He stepped forward and prepared to receive the ball. However, just as he was about to receive the ball, a figure suddenly flashed in front of him. Then, the ball disappeared. What? Isaiah Thomas reacted quickly and immediately looked at the person running away. That person was none other than Jianghu. He only saw that Jianghu, who stole the ball at this time, was chewing gum while running quickly to the opponent's basket. After all, it was the first ball. Isaiah Thomas gave up after thinking for a while. After watching Jianghu rush directly to the opponent's half of the court and cross the three-point line, Jianghu received the ball. 1 step, 2 steps. Jianghu stepped on the free throw line and flew up. In the surprised eyes of the audience, he slammed the ball into the basket like a tomahawk. Wow, my God, what did I see? A tomahawk at the free throw line? The person who did this is Jianghu? A manor owner? Looking at Jianghu, who landed on the ground, many people on the sidelines exclaimed loudly. They did not expect Jianghu to be so strong. The people on the court were also a little stunned. They all looked at Jianghu with surprise. They did not expect that Jianghu's first shot would be like this. It really surprised them. In the United States, there were many people who could jump from the free throw line, but there were not many Asians who could jump from the free throw line. Let's continue. However, there were also 2 people on the court who were very clear about Jianghu's strength. They were Avery Bradley and Evan Turner, who had seen Jianghu's power. They knew that Jianghu was just warming up, so they smiled and said to each other, "Let's continue." Looking at their annoying faces, Paul Pierce frowned and said loudly. Hearing Paul Pierce's words, everyone here began to get busy. The high school player first went back to pass the ball to Isaiah Thomas and then ran to the opponent's half of the court. After Isaiah Thomas dribbled the ball across the half of the court, he saw Jianghu in front of him. The 2 of them were facing each other, but in his eyes, Jianghu at this time was really full of loopholes. He stood so casually in front of him. He did not stand in a triple threat position, nor did he stand in a defensive position. He just stood there casually. It could be seen that Jianghu should be a layman. Although he had strong physical fitness, Isaiah Thomas did not care. After quickly dribbling the ball in his hands a few times, he made 2 feints. Then he stepped on the ground and sprinted. He wanted to use the change of rhythm and his own strong explosive power to pass Jianghu. Unfortunately, he still underestimated Jianghu. When he finally exerted his strength, Jianghu was already standing in front of him perfectly. He directly bumped into Jianghu's body. It was not an exaggeration to say that Jianghu's body was humanoid steel. This collision almost stunned Isaiah Thomas. He subconsciously took 2 steps back, but this retreat revealed the ball he was protecting. Jianghu went up and said nothing. He directly took out the ball, and the ball was in his hands in an instant. Isaiah Thomas immediately yelled for defense when he felt the ball being thrown away. Then, everyone quickly ran back. But when they ran in place, they found that Jianghu was still dribbling the ball. Josh Smith and the player were also a little confused. Looking at Jianghu, they did not know what the richest man in Winthrop was doing. Only Avery Bradley and Evan Turner knew, and they were also strolling there leisurely. Seeing that the people on the other side were already in position, Jianghu glanced at the referee beside him who was still counting down the seconds. The 8-second time limit was halftime, and now there were already 6 seconds. Looking at the referee, Jianghu passed the ball to his right hand and casually threw it. The basketball flew out like a cannonball. In about a second, the basketball directly hit the inside of the basket and bounced into the net. The moment the basketball hit the net, the whole stadium was silent. This is a shot. In the audience, many people who knew basketball were confused. At this time, Jianghu was standing near the center circle in his own half of the court. In other words, he did not jump, nor did he use his hands. He threw the ball with one hand and it went in. When did basketball become such a sport? They really did not understand, and at the same time, they were dumbfounded. But that did not stop them from immediately taking out their phones and starting to record the game on the court. Their sixth sense told them that this game was going to explode. He's become stronger again. Looking at Jianghu, Avery Bradley's eyes were shining. He thought that if his team signed Jianghu, then his team would be the champion this year. No, any team that signed Jianghu would be the champion, but it was impossible for them to sign Jianghu, because Jianghu did not lack their money. Let's continue. Evan Turner patted Avery Bradley's shoulder. He saw more clearly than he did. Jianghu could not join an NBA team because he did not need glory or money. So he was more open-minded and shouted to the people in front of him. Hearing his words, the people here looked at each other. Jordan took a deep breath and passed the ball. Now, when they looked at Jianghu again, they felt strange. Was this guy really that strong? Isaiah Thomas was definitely not satisfied. In a charity match like this, he had been beaten twice in a row. Especially the second goal, which was scored with an almost insulting style of play. He was definitely not happy. So when the ball started again, he went to find Jianghu again. He wanted revenge. Paul Pierce and the others also pulled apart, indicating that he would play a single. Phew. Isaiah Thomas took a deep breath. The basketball was like a fairy, constantly dancing on his fingertips. The sound of the basketball hitting the floor was also transmitted to everyone's ears. In front of him, Jianghu just stood there calmly. The defense was originally full of holes, but for some reason, Isaiah Thomas felt a little weak. He did not dare to break through. Maybe it was because of the momentum just now, or maybe it was because of Jianghu's momentum. But after all, he was going to be a star player of a team next season. His heart was unusually big. Although the atmosphere was a little suffocating, he still decided to challenge himself. With a shout, he was ready to break through in an instant. After a huge change in front of his body, he broke through to Jianghu's left side. Seeing his movement, Jianghu also moved a step to the left. At this moment, he suddenly changed direction. His ankle was almost broken. He pulled the ball and his center of gravity to the right side. Then, to prevent Jianghu from following, he also turned around. Seeing his movement, the people on the court who knew basketball could not help but have their eyes lit up. The crossover, the cross step, was a small person's passing skill that Allen Iverson carried forward. Wuxia also translated it as the butterfly step through flowers. Now, Isaiah Thomas's movement had almost reached 80% of Allen Iverson's level in his heyday. No one in the league could defend against this pass. In their view, Jianghu would definitely be passed this time. The only people who still had confidence in Jianghu were Avery Bradley and Evan Turner. Sure enough, just as Isaiah Thomas almost risked his injury to make such a pass, he still could not pass Jianghu. And most importantly, he lost the ball. Because Jianghu came to his side without him knowing. The moment he turned around, Jianghu's hand also stretched out. It was unusually clean. He grabbed the ball that bounced from the ground into his hand and then casually threw it to Evan Turner. Playing basketball, he could not just play by himself, right? At the same time, he also slowly walked to the opponent's half of the court. Evan Turner also expressed his understanding and immediately pushed the ball across the half of the court. The opponent's defense was not slow. They stood in position immediately, and Jianghu was still slowly strolling toward the inside. At this time, Paul Pierce and the others were guarding a joint defense. This was originally to deal with Josh Smith because Jordan could not defend against him. But this time, it saved Isaiah Thomas because he did not need to match up with Jianghu. He just watched Jianghu walk to the three-point line. When he walked to the free throw line, he pointed up. Want to pass? No way. Seeing Jianghu's movement, DeAndre Jordan, who was once called the representative of the city of passing, naturally knew what Jianghu was going to do. Jianghu's two attacks just now had almost destroyed their newspaper. If Jianghu still played a passing game now, they would not be able to continue playing. So at the moment, he also secretly shouted and directly gave up on the inside line and rushed out. Evan Turner, who had full confidence in Jianghu, naturally would not disappoint Jianghu's expectations. In an instant, he directly passed an alley-oop ball from outside the three-point line. Seeing the ball coming, Jianghu also ran toward the inside line. For a moment, Jianghu and DeAndre Jordan rushed toward the ball together. When they were about 2 meters away from the basket, DeAndre Jordan also jumped up instantly. He felt that in this position, he could intercept the ball. While he jumped, he was still looking at Jianghu. Jianghu did not intend to jump. He even took an extra step forward. Seeing this, DeAndre Jordan could not help but laugh disdainfully. This guy is indeed a little strange, but no matter how strange he is just a layman. If he jumps at this time, how can he jump higher than me? Seeing that he was getting higher and higher, and the basketball was getting closer and closer to him, at this moment, suddenly, a figure appeared in front of him. No one thought that Jianghu's speed could be so fast. Even though he was 1 step behind, he was still in front of little Jordan. And when little Jordan stopped in the air, Jianghu was still in the air. With a soft snap, Jianghu's left hand caught the basketball in the air first. Then he turned directly in the air and wanted to dunk. Looking at Jianghu's indifferent look, little Jordan's forehead could not help but break out in a cold sweat. He had an ominous feeling, but at this time, he was still in the air and could not avoid it. He could only grit his teeth and fiercely pounce. This ball must not be scored by Jianghu. But just as he was about to pounce on Jianghu, Jianghu stretched out his empty right hand and gently pushed DeAndre Jordan in the air. DeAndre Jordan felt his forward momentum suddenly stagnate. Then he was horrified to find that Jianghu was flying backward with him. In everyone's surprised eyes, Jianghu's chin was above the basket. His right hand suddenly dunked the ball directly into the basket. Chapter 797. Bang! 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 Hua! 4 sounds rang out in succession. The first was the sound of Jianghu smashing the basketball into the basket, the second was the sound of little Jordan landing on the ground, the third was the sound of him hitting the basketball rack directly, and the fourth was the sound of Jianghu smashing the backboard into pieces. After the 4 sounds, everyone was stunned and dumbfounded. Everyone's eyes were focused on Jianghu, but Jianghu was still hanging on the basket, chewing gum very calmly. It was as if he had just completed a very ordinary layup. He was not surprised at all. Oh, my God, my God. My God, what did I just see? Another person besides Shaq to break a rebound in a game. My God, my God. Oh, my God, countless people looked at Jianghu. Everyone did not understand how Jianghu's body, which did not seem very strong, had such powerful strength. And these people's voices also shocked everyone on the court. Paul Pierce and Josh Smith ran in front of little Jordan immediately. They knew that little Jordan was only there to gain reputation. If he was injured, they would not be able to bear the consequences when they went back. But they deliberately bypassed Jianghu. First, it was because Jianghu was the local bully, and there was no conflict. Second, it was because of the kind of momentum that Jianghu exuded, which made them not dare to approach him. This guy was too ferocious. Little Jordan was also very confused at this time, but he did not have any intention of getting angry. First, it was because this was Jianghu's territory. Second, it was also because Jianghu's action just now was very clean. There was no additional force in the air. He directly used his own bounce speed, suspension, and strength to forcefully push over, which made him completely confused. How could a yellow-skinned person have such a strong body? How could he? He could only look up at Jianghu. Then, with the help of Paul Pierce and Josh Smith, he stood up. The vice principal on the sidelines also sent his own cleaning staff to clean up the broken glass plates. Since the 1990s, no one had broken glass panels because the glass was made of plexiglass, which meant that it was like the front windshield of a car. After it was broken, it would become a crack, but it wouldn't fall off. It was still a hole. Jianghu wasn't sure what was added to the glass, but it basically wouldn't break. However, Jianghu had broken it today. It could only be said that this piece of glass was too fragile. Fortunately, there were still a lot of backboards in the basketball court. After the referee stopped the game, the staff went to change the backboards. Jianghu and the others returned to their respective resting areas and sat there to rest. Be gentle. Aren't you afraid that that thing will break and stab others? As soon as Jianghu sat down, Feng Yunshan, who was sitting behind him, patted Jianghu on the shoulder and said with a smile. Listening to her deliberately loud words, Jianghu also smiled. This little Ni really likes to show off. In fact, she was now more of a declaration of sovereignty, representing that Jianghu was her family. Look at how powerful our Jianghu is. Jianghu didn't care about this and just smiled there. You really should pay more attention. If you really break the backboard, then you can't play anymore. At this time, Avery Bradley also came over with a smile and said to Jianghu. It was obvious that he was in a good mood. Evan Turner, who was next to him, also laughed. This game was really interesting. On the other hand, Josh Smith looked at the other side with some worry. After all, little Jordan was his teammate. If he was really broken by Jianghu, then it would be troublesome. Fortunately, Jianghu's actions just now were not harmful. Although little Jordan fell, this kind of fall would not cause any problems for an NBA player. Look at AI and Wade. Which one of them didn't fall 8 or 10 times in a game? They all learned how to fall without pain or injury. This was also a kind of skill. Although little Jordan's head was in a daze, he still subconsciously used this kind of skill when he fell. The fall really didn't hurt, and he didn't get injured. If you entered the NBA, I don't know if it would be a disaster or a blessing for professional basketball. But fortunately, you didn't go. Looking at little Jordan and the others, who still had lingering fears, Bradley also said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jianghu couldn't help but roll his eyes. He refused to talk about the NBA because it was impossible for him to play in this kind of thing. Now, it was a good choice to occasionally abuse them. Soon, the backboard was changed. Jianghu and the others also looked at each other and came to the court again. Jianghu, come on. Seeing that Jianghu was going to play again, the girls in the audience shouted excitedly. Look, I'm not only going to go to heaven, I'm also going to stand side by side with the sun. Hearing the shouts of the girls, Jianghu gave them a thumbs up and said with a smile on his face. Hearing Jianghu's words, everyone who knew about this joke couldn't help but laugh. At this time, the score on the court was 7-0. Although the gap didn't seem to be big, Paul Pierce and the others were clearly a little discouraged, especially little Jordan and Isaiah Thomas. They were a little afraid of Jianghu. After Isaiah Thomas passed half the court, he directly threw the basketball to Paul Pierce. Uncle Pi could be said to be the only person who was not affected, so let him play. Pierce was playing as a power forward today. After receiving the ball, he played solo against the NBDL player. His experience, his strength, and his weight allowed him to easily play against people who were much worse than him. After a few shots, he changed his rhythm very slowly and slipped into the lane. After all, this was an exhibition game, so Joseph didn't seriously defend and easily moved aside. After Jianghu looked, he also decided to play one. Just like that, Paul Pierce easily made a layup and scored the ball, scoring their team's first point. Then Jianghu and the others advanced, but this time, Jianghu didn't do it himself. It was quite boring to play all by himself. After dribbling the ball for half the court, looking at the nervous Isaiah Thomas in front of him, Jianghu smiled and passed the ball to Evan Turner. Evan Turner was originally chosen by the 76ers to be the core of the team. Although from a later point of view, he was a poor version of Iguodala and was indeed not a good candidate to be the team's soul. Iguodala was a poor version of LeBron James, and he was a poor version of Iguodala. Although he was all around, it also meant that he couldn't do anything. At least he was not like Iguodala, who was the best at defense. He was not the best at anything. However, such a person was also very annoying, because when he wanted to attack, he knew everything, and it was really not easy to defend. Especially his opponent, who was an NBA player, was easily swept into the paint by him. Little Jordan was also released at this time, allowing him to complete a dunk and end the attack. When Pierce's team organized another attack, Isaiah Thomas calmed down after a round of rest. He wanted to do it himself this time, but the problem was that Jianghu was guarding against him, and he was indeed a little nervous. So he gave Little Jordan a look in the paint, and Little Jordan immediately pulled out a pick and roll. Jianghu did not forcibly push him away, but took advantage of the situation to let Isaiah Thomas enter the paint. Joseph had no problem defending against pick and rolls. After all, he was also known to be a man who could defend 5 positions. Although his pace was now slow, it was not particularly slow. At least he could still keep up with Isaiah Thomas's pace. However, when a guard played inside the paint, as long as he moved out of position, he could shoot. It was easy for Isaiah Thomas to move out of position, but when he saw Jianghu not far from him, he was a little nervous. He did not dare to shoot himself. He just happened to see Little Jordan running inside the paint after the pick and roll. He could not help but think of a plan. In fact, Little Jordan's actions were subconscious. When he was with the Clippers, he was mainly a threat on the offensive end. There were only 2 points. One was the offense under the basket and the second point was the cut after the pick and roll. He did not need to attack from the low post. He did not have the ability to attack, and he did not have the player. In the Clippers, the one who controlled the rhythm was Chris Paul. The offensive knife was Blake Griffin. His main role was to defend, and the offensive side was to slam dunk. So, this time, after the pick and roll, he subconsciously walked inside the paint, which happened to be seen by Isaiah Thomas. Although Little Thomas should be considered an offensive guard, he was still a point guard. His strength was still there. As soon as he saw Little Jordan walk inside, he immediately made a high-profile move. This meant that he was going to take the free pass. Seeing the basketball flying in the air and in a good position, Little Jordan was stunned for a moment. Then, he was ecstatic. He instantly ran 2 steps forward and then jumped. He grabbed the basketball immediately and was about to slam dunk. However, at that moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Little Jordan was stunned. The figure's right hand slammed into the middle of the basketball. Jianghu. Feeling the huge force in his hand, Little Jordan's eyes were working well. He saw who the person in front of him was at a glance. He thought for a moment. Although he was a little hesitant, he knew that if he forced it, he would probably be overpowered. Instead of that, it was better to hold back a little to prevent himself from getting hurt. Sure enough, his idea was correct. Because just as he was about to hold back, Jianghu's power erupted. He did not give him a chance to resist. The basketball was sent flying. Fortunately, he had already held back. Otherwise, he would have been easily injured. Chapter 798. Bro, this is just a charity game. You don't play in the NBA. Don't be so nervous. Relax, relax. The basketball was swatted away and was caught by the high school player on Pierce's team. Then, with no one guarding the court, he scored the ball and scored 2 points. After landing, Little Jordan looked at Jianghu with some brilliance, and said with a little bit of a smile, "What a joke." "Oh, I wasn't serious." "Okay, I'll hold back a little." Looking at Little Jordan, Jianghu was stunned for a moment. Then, he muttered to himself and said slowly. Hearing Jianghu's words, many people around him felt a little nervous. "You weren't serious? What else do you want? Do you want to go to heaven?" When the game started again, Jianghu also started to go easy on his teammates. He only defended against his own defenders. He didn't defend too much. As for his offense, it was no longer as sharp as before, unless the 30 seconds of attack time was almost up. Otherwise, he kept getting assists. Maybe he felt that Jianghu didn't want the game to end so soon. So, his teammates stopped passing the ball back to him. Basically, they played on their own. For a while, the game was much more interesting. Unknowingly, the time had reached 8 minutes. After Paul Pierce committed a foul, the referee called for an official timeout. The two sides were ready to switch players. At this time, the score was 35-21. Jianghu's team was leading by 14 points. Jianghu had 13 points, 7 assists, 2 blocks, 3 steals, and 5 rebounds in 8 minutes. This kind of result was really a little speechless. This was because Jianghu kept passing the ball. If he wanted to score, of course, if he directly killed the game, it would be meaningless. At least, he didn't want to do that. When the 8 minutes were up, Jianghu's team had 4 people on the court. Except for Evante, who continued to control the rhythm of the game, everyone else left the game. The opposite team was the same. Only Paul Pierce, who was making free throws, was left. After that, it could be seen that the competition on the field had become more lively than before, but the viewing value had plummeted. Regardless of whether they were amateurs, university students, high school students, or NBDL players, their standards were indeed lacking. However, the situation in the stadium was rather heated. Everyone could not break through, and neither could they. In the end, they still had to rely on Evan Turner and Paul Pierce to score. After about 3 minutes, Grandpa Pai went off to rest. After all, he was old. The new player, Isaiah Thomas, might have been a little depressed by Jianghu's 8 minutes of playing. When he got on the court, he showed his prowess. His ability as an NBA offensive guard was on full display. Isaiah Thomas was very short. He was small and short. Because of this, when he first entered the league, no one was optimistic about him. It could be seen from his draft position. He was the 30th pick in the second round and the last to enter the NBA. However, he did not disappoint. Although he was the last to enter, his offensive ability was gradually displayed. When he was with the Kings, he was the sharpest 6th player. After he joined the Boston Celtics, his offensive ability was infinitely magnified. At this time, he was naturally the strongest one on the court. The player opposite him was an NBDL player. Originally, in the NBDL league, his ability was very good. He averaged more than 20 points and 7 or 8 assists per game. However, at this time, he was completely destroyed by Isaiah Thomas in front of him. Not only was he unable to defend against the offense, breakthroughs, shots, and three-pointers, but Isaiah Thomas also did quite well on the defensive side. Although he was too short and could not defend against the opponent's shots, his mobile defense on the ground was quite good. Under his attack, the score was slowly pulled back. With 3 minutes left in the first half, the score was only 2 points. 1 goal would be enough to catch up and even surpass. At this time, Avery Bradley called a timeout and replaced the substitutes with him and Jianghu. When Jianghu came on the court again, the audience on the sidelines reached a limit and cheered loudly. "Hey, man, look, the score is back." Listening to the cheers, Isaiah Thomas, who had scored more than 10 points in a row, smiled and raised his eyebrows at Jianghu. "It's open now." Hearing his words, Jianghu then received the ball from Bradley. Then, at his own three-point line, he threw it with his right hand. Yes, it was not a shot, but a throw. Just like that, the basketball hit the inside of the basket and bounced into the basket with 2 consecutive sounds of peng and schwa. Wow! It's here again. Can't we play properly? What is this? Is this a shot? Looking at Jianghu's ball again, the audience could not help but shout. Isaiah Thomas on the opposite side licked his lips. He was a little overwhelmed. Jianghu just glanced at him indifferently. For him, this was no big deal. You dare to provoke him? Your courage is commendable, but don't think about winning this game. Think about how to play well. Looking at Isaiah Thomas, who was walking back to serve the ball, DeAndre Jordan had already given up. Faced with such a humanoid monster, it was better for them to play recreational basketball. The only thing to be thankful for was that he would not play professionally. Sigh, that's the only way. With a sigh, Isaiah Thomas curled his lips and said. Although he was a little unwilling, he really had no way to win against Jianghu in front of him. Although Isaiah Thomas admitted defeat, Jianghu did not know this. He thought he was going to explode. So in the next attack, Isaiah Thomas was going to pass the ball, but it was instantly snatched by Jianghu. Then he was like a wild dog that had escaped its leash. He rushed toward the opponent's half of the court. Then, under everyone's surprised eyes, Jianghu stepped about 10 centimeters outside the three-point line and flew. Yes, he flew. He flew into the inside of the three-point line. In front of the audience's jaws that were about to hit the soles of their feet, a tomahawk-style slam dunk hit the basketball into the basket. When the basketball fell to the ground, the audience was silent again. The Chinese flying man will show you what a tomahawk from the three-point line is. Where is the limit of human beings? Where is the limit of Chinese people? The invincible Chinese street ball king dominates the NBA. Let me tell you a joke, Chinese people can't make good guards. Look, I'm still quite handsome on camera. Looking at the news reported by a lot of American media and Wuxia media, Jianghu said to Qi Jia with a smile. When she heard Jianghu's words, Qi Jia could not help but roll her eyes at him. This guy was really shameless, but her eyes still looked at the collection on Jianghu's laptop. This was what those people had recorded when Jianghu had participated in the competition that day. Then, they had edited it and added the accompanying music. It really wasn't an ordinary kind of firework. Those titles just now were the titles of Jianghu's highlights on various major forums. In fact, when this collection was first released, she had watched it more than 10 times. When she thought that the man in the video was her man, her heart was also very happy. Coupled with the music of Remember the Name, it was really very exciting. In the video, Jianghu was omnipotent. He got up and made a slam dunk, suppressed DeAndre Jordan, and continuously stole Isaiah Thomas. He had infinite vision and passed the ball from behind. He stood domineeringly outside the three-point line and waved his hand to throw the ball in. Coupled with the tomahawk from the three-point line, the music and the video really ignited the whole world. As soon as the video came out, it caused a lot of sensation on the internet. On YouTube 13, there were hundreds of thousands of views overnight. However, many people who were watching the show wondered if this was a stunt or if it was done with a computer. Immediately, many people proved that this was true. They also released a lot of original tapes, which were the original tapes of Jianghu's game. Looking at the original tapes, these people were even more confused. How could there be such a strong person on Earth? There were even people who linked to Paul Pierce, DeAndre Jordan, Josh Smith, Isaiah Thomas, Avery Bradley, and Evan Turner's tweets, asking if this was real or if they had filmed it. However, these people all gave a reply and said that they must be real. That's why they agreed to compete with Jianghu. Only Evan Turner and Avery Bradley were somewhat gloating. Josh Smith was even more generous and said that this was the easiest game he had ever played. The only pity was that Jianghu was not an NBA player. Otherwise, he would rather spend money to be on the same team as Jianghu. The people who were watching the show were a little confused about these people's comments. The video went viral on this side of the ocean and also spread to Wuxia on the other side of the ocean. Many people in Wuxia knew about Jianghu overnight. Although they did not know what Jianghu's name was and where he lived, they knew that there was someone who could be so strong among the Chinese. His strength was somewhat inexplicable. How could he make a slam dunk from the three-point line? There were even some CBA players who did not repost the video, but their point of view was that it was done by the computer because it was impossible for people to do this. Of course, they were actually telling the truth. It was impossible for people to do this. But the problem was that Jianghu was not an ordinary person. How could they understand the strength of Jianghu? After watching the highlights happily, Jianghu asked Qi Jia with a smile, "I'm now an internet celebrity." Although all he got in return was a supercilious look, Jianghu smiled happily. Although it was troublesome for him to participate in the competition, there were still benefits for him. At least, it made him very happy. In fact, the benefits he got were far more than that. Didn't you have an appointment with Mr. Pierce and the others for dinner today? It's already 3:00. At this moment, Chia came from the side and looked at Jianghu, who was still nestled on the sofa, and could not help but ask with some doubts. Chapter 799. Sorry. I'm late. Looking at Paul Pierce, DeAndre Jordan, Josh Smith, Avery Bradley, Evan Turner, and Isaiah Thomas in front of him, Jianghu smiled and said to them. This was a private party. After the game that day, Jianghu had also attended the party they had organized. After the party, these people had gotten to know each other through fighting. Moreover, Jianghu had such strength in the event that they were best at, so these people were very interested in Jianghu. After the party that night, they had specially invited Jianghu to get together again. However, this was a private party. After today's party, they would return to their respective teams to prepare for tomorrow's game. Among these people, Avery Bradley admired Jianghu the most. Isaiah Thomas and DeAndre Jordan feared Jianghu the most. There was no other way. After that game, they had really lost their confidence. They believed that if Jianghu said that he wanted to play professionally, then he would become the benchmark of this era. Just like Jordan, it was a tragedy to be born in the same era as him. Of course, Jianghu was much better than Jordan. However, Jianghu did not care about the salary of the NBA. What a joke. An NBA player had to play so many games a year. They started training in mid-September, the preseason game in October, the official game in November, and all the way until mid-April last year. It was fine if they did not make it to the playoffs. They only played 82 games in the regular season and rested after that. Even if they made it to the playoffs, they still had to play in the playoffs. If they were really not careful and made it to the finals, they would have to wait until June to finish. After the end of June, there was less than 3 months of rest before the new season. Perhaps for the fans, these few months of rest would be difficult, but for Jianghu, he would not put his energy and time into games. If he had the time, it would be better to lie at home and watch others play. It was quite interesting. They knew that Jianghu did not care about the small amount of money from playing NBA stars, so Paul Pierce and the others were very happy to make friends with him. After all, these people were his idols, so Jianghu was also very happy to make friends with them. That was why today's meeting was held. However, Jianghu was not in a hurry. When he arrived, although it was still on time, the others had already arrived. It's okay. We have been practicing by ourselves these past few days, so it's not strange that we all came together. Let's go. Let's go out and play. I haven't played in Boston for a while. Seeing that Jianghu had also come over, Paul Pierce spoke with a hoarse voice with a smile. Paul Pierce should be one of the favorite stars in the NBA. The reason why he earned his nickname was because he went to a place where he shouldn't have gone to. As a result, he was stabbed 11 times. However, he didn't die or become crippled. Instead, he became stronger and stronger. He had to admit that the human body was indeed a wonderful thing. However, although he liked to play, he wouldn't be photographed often. He still paid more attention to the time and place. Unlike the nightclubs, he was somewhat addicted to this kind of thing. Regardless of whether he was in a competition or not, he would still go to nightclubs. This was also his habit. Today was the off-season, so it did not matter whether he went to play or not. Then let's go. Although Jianghu did not know where they were asking him to go, looking at their green eyes, Jianghu knew that they were definitely not going to a good place. But to be honest, he really did not know what fun places there were in Boston. The educational atmosphere here was so strong that there were no nightclubs in the city. The atmosphere was not very good. Of course, Jianghu himself did not like nightclubs. Because he felt that they were too noisy, but it was inevitable that it would be strange, especially since he had been to New York. However, Paul Pierce was an old local here. He knew these places very well. In fact, in the city of Boston, there were indeed no nightclubs. This was also not in line with the academic atmosphere here. Therefore, the Massachusetts government and the Boston City Council would not allow such a place to exist. But people also needed to vent, especially in the United States. Those white-collar workers, students, and the like also needed to go there to play. If there was a demand, there would be a supply. Therefore, there were still such places in Massachusetts. Jianghu followed Paul Pierce. Not long after, they came to a block that did not seem very conspicuous, but after entering it, he found that it was a different world. In this block, almost the entire street was filled with bars and nightclubs. Now that it was dark, there were not many people. After all, Paul Pierce and the others were also public figures, so it was inevitable for them to come when there were fewer people. According to Paul Pierce, it was very safe to come here to play. First of all, 90% of the people playing here were students. Students meant that they wouldn't easily encounter badger games, wine stalls, or get into trouble. Second, there were not many students who dared to play games. They did not have to be too careful when drinking. For example, athletes usually had to be very careful when eating and drinking, because some drugs and the like were absolutely not to be touched. They were still very self-disciplined. If they were caught by the police, it would be fine. But if they failed a urine test, it would be interesting. These guys' careers might be over. Jianghu drove and followed Paul Pierce's car slowly. Although these guys came together, each of them drove a car. This was also because if they wanted to take someone away later, they would not be able to take anyone away if they were crowded in one car. With Paul Pierce at the front, it did not take long for these people to come to the back door of a bar. After parking the car, Jianghu and the others also got out of the car in turn. There was a big black man waiting here for a long time. "Hey, Paul, how have you been?" Seeing Paul Pierce coming over, the big man over there said with a smile. "Not bad, how about you?" "Man." Hearing his words, Paul Pierce also said with a smile. "I'm still the same. After all, I work for others." Shrugging, the man said helplessly. Indeed, for him, there was no difference. After Paul Pierce heard this, he smiled and took out a franc from his pocket and stuffed it into the man's pocket. Then the man laughed instantly. "Come on, let's go in." Then the man did not talk nonsense. He directly took out a stamp and prepared to stamp Jianghu's wrists. This was also an anti-underage mark in American bars. In the United States, at the age of 16, you could go to a nightclub, but the standard for drinking in the United States was 21 years old. In such bars or nightclubs in the United States, before entering, you would be asked to show your ID card, and then such a stamp would be stamped. If you were under 21 years old, you could only drink in the bar. If you were full, you could drink. Jianghu and the others were naturally full and dissatisfied. For the sake of Franklin, they were full. Then they went straight into the bar. Walking into the bar, Jianghu and the others found that there were not many people in the bar at this time. The DJ was still adjusting the equipment, and the waiters were still digging the floor and glasses. Only a few children, who looked like high school students, came in with curiosity and looked around the nightclub. Seeing people, Paul Pierce and the others all hid in the darkness, and then took the side road and went straight to a box on the second floor. The door of this box was open to the outside. They could see the dance floor outside and feel the atmosphere there, but it was not too noisy. The box was big enough. There were not only sofas, separate bar counters, and even a billiard table. This was a snooker table. Jianghu had seen it before, but he had never played it. He was not interested in it. Jianghu used to like sports. When he was young, he liked football. Later, he liked basketball. For a period of time, he also liked tennis. He also played bowling and volleyball. But the only thing he didn't know how to play was two balls. One was the national ball of Wuxia, and the other was billiards. He was not very interested in it. Seeing that Jianghu was not very interested in it, Evan Turner and Josh Smith went to play first. Jianghu and the others sat on the sofa. Then Paul Pierce took the drink list and handed it to Jianghu. I don't really know how to drink these things. Just give me some Budweiser. Shaking his head, Jianghu really did not know much about these things. He liked beer. Foreign wine and red wine were not his cup of tea. All right. Give me 4 bottles of Martell Blue, a bottle of Biyao, and a bartender. You can decide who you want. Seeing that Jianghu did not order, the others followed his lead. Paul Pierce also smiled. He was also a regular customer here, so he naturally knew what to order. He said casually. The waiter who led them in also smiled and left. Not long after, a woman in a woman's suit came in with a few waiters. To be honest, the woman in a woman's suit didn't look young. She was about 30 years old, but she looked pretty good. After entering the bar, she nodded indifferently to Jianghu. Paul Pierce waved his hand and she walked into the bar. She was Jianghu's bartender today. Chapter 800. The waiters were here to deliver the drinks. After the drinks were placed, there were also some fruit platters and the like. These were all gifts for Paul Pierce. After delivering the drinks, the female bartender also inquired about their situation. After confirming their tastes, the female bartender first made a few glasses of aperitif. The so-called aperitif was similar to an appetizer. It was also called an aperitif, which often appeared in Western food. However, this wine was similar to hangover medicine. It was drunk before drinking. Firstly, it was to protect the stomach. Secondly, it was to allow the body to adapt to the alcohol in advance. This way, the body wouldn't pull the shuttle and wouldn't get hurt. Paul Pierce and the others were experts in these things. Of course, Jianghu would not understand these things. Soon, a few glasses of sweet and sour aperitif were made. Jianghu and the others also drank 2 glasses each. After drinking, they needed some time to adapt to the alcohol, so they were still playing on their own. The youngest among them, Avery Bradley, had already brought Isaiah Thomas, the second youngest of the preparation group, to the window, ready to look for prey. Josh Smith and Evan Turner were still playing at the table. DeAndre Jordan was probably afraid that 2 glasses of aperitif would not be very effective because of his size, so he sat at the bar and drank 1 glass after another. Only Jianghu and Paul Pierce were still calm. Jianghu estimated that it would be difficult for him to meet someone he liked, but Paul Pierce had met so many that he was already very calm. Sitting on the sofa, the two chatted intermittently. Before meeting Paul Pierce, Jianghu would think that this guy might be a very arrogant guy. Indeed, this guy was a good person in terms of style and speech. He was a very straightforward person. If he had something to say, he would say it directly. Sometimes, he would joke a little too much. But after all, he was a man in his 30s. He couldn't go too far. At most, he would joke that Jianghu was so busy every night that his waist couldn't hold up. So when he chatted with Jianghu, he still had a good time. The two chatted together. Unknowingly, the sky gradually darkened. Many people began to enter one after another. On this side, Avery Bradley and Isaiah Thomas gradually became serious. "Hey, Paul, we'll go down first." After looking up there for about 10 minutes, they should have found their respective targets, so after saying something to Paul Pierce, they hurriedly went down. "You're not going down?" After seeing the two go down, the other 4 did not move. Jianghu asked them with some surprise. Didn't they say that black people were very urgent in this regard? Why didn't they do anything? "Hey, what's the hurry? We're going down to reel in the net." Now that we're down, those girls are very calm. We have to drink with them and dance with them, and it's easy to be tricked. Let's wait a little longer. Hearing Jianghu's words, Josh Smith said with a smile. Hearing what he said, Jianghu could not help but secretly give him a thumbs up. It seemed that Josh Smith had received a lot of education when he was young. This was all experience. Sure enough, after another half an hour, Evan Turner, DeAndre Jordan, and Josh Smith went down together. After they went down, Paul Pierce also walked to the door of the box with Jianghu. Take a look and see if there's anyone you like. If there's someone you like, then go straight to the topic. If there's no one you like, then drink here. I'm going down too. Looking at Jianghu, Paul Pierce said with a smile. Oh, let me take a look. If it was in the past, Jianghu would probably refuse. Even when he went to New York with Moses Adams, he was actually quite resistant to these things. But now, he will not easily refuse. Men become bad when they have money. This sentence is actually not wrong. Hearing Paul Pierce's words, Jianghu also looked at the Buddha of Tiantan and did not refuse. Instead, he looked at the dance floor. Although Jianghu did not refuse, his vision would not be lowered because of this. If there was no one he liked on the dance floor, then he would not go down. After all, there were so many beautiful women waiting for him at home. As Jianghu glanced around, not long after, he saw a beautiful figure on the first floor. This figure did not look like a student. She was not on the dance floor, but sitting on the bar next to the dance floor. After Jianghu glanced at it, he smiled, then pointed at the figure. Wow, I advise you not to get involved with that woman. Seeing Jianghu pointing to the woman, Paul Pierce could not help but shake his head, and then looked at Jianghu with some pity. His eyes clearly said, "You are a nightclub newbie. Is there a problem?" Looking at Paul Pierce, Jianghu asked with some doubts. That kind of woman is so eye-catching in the nightclub, but she doesn't have any men around her. This is not a novel. It's impossible for such a woman not to be targeted here. But now, friend, this means that there must be a bodyguard around her. Such a woman, we call her trouble. She's not a rich girl who will force you to marry her, she's the boss's woman, so you understand. Hearing Jianghu's words, Paul Pierce also said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jianghu also curled his lips. It seemed that he had no interest in anything else. Then he shrugged. After watching Paul Pierce go downstairs, Jianghu sat at the bar and prepared to drink some wine by himself. Seeing that Jianghu did not go downstairs, the female bartender also stood up. Her job was to make drinks for Jianghu. Now that Jianghu did not go downstairs, it was naturally time for her to work. Sir, what would you like to drink? Looking at Jianghu, the female bartender asked indifferently. Oh, I don't know much about these things. Just make whatever you want, but don't make it too strong. I have to drive back in a while. You know, my home is in Winthrop. Hearing her words, Jianghu smiled and said very plainly. Okay. Hearing Jianghu's words, the female bartender also picked up a lot of bottles and glasses, as well as raw materials and the like, and began to mix. This was the first time that Jianghu watched someone mix a drink. To be exact, it was the first time that he watched someone mix a drink at such a close distance, so he also watched very carefully, but the movements of mixing a drink were limited. Unconsciously, Jianghu had watched it once and had no interest. As for men, unconsciously, his eyes glanced at the unbuttoned shirt of the female bartender. He didn't know if it was because it was hot here, after all, mixing a drink also required a lot of movements, or because she was used to it. The top 3 buttons of her shirt were unbuttoned. Jianghu hadn't noticed it before, but at this moment, not only could he see her collarbone, 2 indescribable things that were constantly moving due to the tremors, there was also that purplish-red vest. In addition, he also saw a tattoo on the inside of this woman's vest, whether it was in ancient times or modern times, whether it was in Wuxia or the United States, tattoos were very common now. In Wuxia, there were different kinds of things that were tattooed. But in the United States, tattoos were actually more of a pretense or a commemorative thing. It might not necessarily have any special meaning. Originally, Jianghu didn't pay too much attention to this tattoo. But suddenly, a flash of inspiration flashed in his mind, and he suddenly remembered the badge that he had been tracking down. It seems a bit like it. Seeing this constantly looming tattoo, Jiang Hai's eyes widened, and he subconsciously looked at the female bartender in front of him. Feeling Jiang Hai's gaze, the female bartender also smiled. Although her main job here was to mix drinks, if she could do something with the guests in these rooms, then she wouldn't refuse. Of course, the most important thing was that her purpose was different from the girls below. Those girls, as long as they were pleasing to the eye, then something indescribable would happen, and she had a purpose. Originally, after she came in and found Paul Pierce, she knew that today might just be a bartender. But she didn't expect that Jiang Hai would stay, and it seemed that he was very interested in her. Sir, flaming hot lips. At this time, the wine in her hand was mixed and placed in front of Jiang Hai, and she said with a smile. May I ask, where are you from? Jiang Hai asked her after taking the wine glass she handed over. Me? I'm from California. Sir, you look like you should be Asian. Wuxia? Japan? Korea? Looking at Jiang Hai, this person asked with a smile, and at the same time, she mixed the next glass of wine and kept shaking her private part. Well, I'm Chinese. You don't have to mix this cup anymore. Can you go somewhere with me? Looking at the female bartender in front of him, Jiang Hai looked at her and asked. He was quite nervous about the pattern in his heart now. It was related to his golden finger. Oh. Gentlemen, in our line of work, if we go to other places to mix drinks, the price will be different. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the female bartender here couldn't help laughing, and her eyes were curved. At least her goal now is money. Chapter 801. Money? Hearing the female bartender's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. If there was one thing he didn't lack, it would be money. Looking at the female bartender in front of him, Jiang Hai took out his wallet, then took out $1,000 from it, and put it on the table. $1,000 was definitely not a small amount of money in the United States. One had to know that a salaried worker in the United States would only earn about $20,000 a year, less than $30,000 a year. If one could earn $50,000 a year, that would be about $500 a week. This female bartender's annual income was about $40,000, less than $600 a week. $1,000 was equivalent to a week and a half's salary. How could she not be tempted? Seeing Jiang Hai being so considerate, she didn't say anything. She just put down the wine glass in her hand and walked out of the counter, looking at Jiang Hai with a pair of charming eyes. Then where are we going to barbecue? Are we going to your house, the hotel, or there? If we're going to barbecue, we'll have to hurry. The female bartender walked straight to Jiang Hai's side, then pointed to the bathroom in the distance and said to Jiang Hai. Then let's go there. But I think it will take a long time. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also smiled. He mainly wanted to ask about the tattoo. Of course, there were some other things that he was also very interested in. Let's go. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the female bartender smiled and pulled Jiang Hai into the bathroom. In this private room, there were 4 separate bathrooms. Not only were there toilets, wash basins, and makeup stations, but there was also a lot of space. There was no need to say what it was used for. After entering the bathroom, the female bartender directly took off her woman's suit, then looked at Jiang Hai with a charming face, unbuttoning her shirt one by one. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little impatient. He directly pulled her over, then pulled her shirt off with force, and then directly unbuttoned her vest. In an instant, 2 indescribable things jumped in front of Jiang Hai, playing with them with both hands. Jiang Hai also carefully looked at the tattoo on it. Sure enough, it was the same as the one he saw in the book. But the problem was, this thing was not a popular tattoo. Why did she get it on this place? Jiang Hai was a little puzzled. Do you like it here so much? Let me help you. Seeing that Jiang Hai liked a certain part of her body so much, the female bartender giggled and then took the initiative to squat down. After all, it was summer now, so Jianghu wore very little pants. There were only 2 pairs of underwear, one for the inside and the other for the outside. They were pulled down by her. The female bartender's eyes suddenly lit up. She sniffed it gently, then looked at it, then opened her mouth and swallowed it. Jianghu's hands were still holding 2 places, constantly checking them. After a while, the female bartender took the opportunity to release Jianghu's unspeakable parts. Jianghu's hands were still holding 2 places, constantly checking them. After a while, the female bartender took the opportunity to release Jianghu's unspeakable parts. It was sandwiched between the 2 indescribable places, using the saliva just now to constantly move. You seem to like it here very much. After freeing her mouth, the female bartender looked at Jianghu and asked with a smile. Well, indeed, but what I'm most curious about is the tattoo here. Where did you get this thing? Looking at the tattoo in front of him, Jianghu said calmly, but deep in his heart, he was very nervous. After all, this thing is very important. This? If you can calm me down, then maybe I will remember it. Looking at Jianghu, the female bartender chuckled and said faintly. Jianghu nodded his head and said, "Don't worry about it." Hearing her words, Jianghu didn't say much nonsense. He directly picked her up and stood up himself. Standing on the ground, he put her on something indescribable. With a loud scream, the rhythm began, and the war began. During this period, Paul Pierce and the others also came up to drink, but after seeing that Jianghu and the bartender had disappeared and a bathroom was locked, they understood that Avery Bradley and Evan Turner went directly to the public bathroom downstairs. The remaining 3 were also occupied by Little Jordan, Isaiah Thomas, and Josh Smith. Paul Pierce was more shameless and directly started to do it in the room. About half an hour later, the men beat the gong and went home with their satisfied female companions. The door of Jianghu's bathroom was also opened. Looking at the text message from Paul Pierce on his phone, Jianghu didn't care. Now he was more concerned about the woman's tattoo. Do you remember it now? Holding the woman who was drunk like mud, Jianghu walked to the side of the sofa and then sat down with her in his arms. His hands were still constantly checking the tattoo. Wow, you're so awesome. Now I know the origin of this tattoo. This thing was left to me by my master. When I was 16, I met a master in California. He opened a bar. When I went to play with my classmates, I met him. Then he taught me how to mix drinks. Of course, when I was 18, I drank too much one night. When I got up, I found myself lying in his arms, and I had this thing tattooed on my breasts. This is not a good memory. Hearing Jianghu's words, the female bartender was very satisfied. She made money and enjoyed it. Although it was a little embarrassing, how much was self-esteem worth to her? Really? Who is he? Did he say what this thing represents? Looking at the female bartender in front of him, Jianghu asked eagerly. His name is Bruce David. I heard that he retired from the Navy before. This thing, he just said that when he went to Antarctica to perform a mission, he saw something similar to a totem. I don't know what it is. Hearing Jianghu's words, the female bartender shook her head. That's all she knows. After hearing her words, Jianghu also carefully wrote it down. You've helped me a lot. These are all for you. Have a good rest. Hearing her words, Jianghu couldn't help but nod. Her information is indeed very useful. Jianghu only needs to find this guy now. Compared to finding a needle in a haystack before, it's not so difficult for Azalina and the others to find him now. Jianghu's sixth sense tells him that this guy named Bruce David must have something to do with what he wants to know. Then he took out the rest of the money from his body, picked a few $100 gauze and put it on the table, then he left. But this time, he wasn't in a hurry to return to Winthrop, because Azaria and the others were more focused on protecting him and his manor. When the time came, they would have to look for him on the outside. After leaving the club, Jianghu drove directly to downtown Boston. He is now a drunk driver, but he won't be caught by the police. It's a bit difficult to make him drunk. Soon, the car arrived outside the villa rented by Al-Sara and the others. As soon as Jianghai's car arrived, the garage of the villa opened. Al-Sara, wearing a black apron on the upper body and a pair of leather shorts on the lower body, was at the door at this time, looking at Jianghai. As Jianghai's car stopped, she smiled and pounced on him. Without saying a word, the two first kissed. After a long kiss, Al-Sara couldn't help but look at Jianghai with a smile. Well, there's a taste of alcohol and a hint of woman in your mouth. Tell me, where have you been? Looking at Jianghai, Al-Sara looked at Jianghai and said. Hearing her words, Jianghai just patted her butt, and she quickly ran upstairs like a frightened rabbit, and Jianghai followed her upstairs. As soon as he walked up, Jianghai found that everyone was here today. Rayla Skarder, Biriak Trotsky, Valentina Alalikia, and Al-Sara were all here. Boss, you're here. As soon as she saw Jianghai coming, Rayla Skarder jumped up at once, then smiled and asked Jianghai to sit in her seat. She then sat directly in Jianghai's arms, grabbed Jianghai's hands, and put them on her two indescribable places. This made Jianghai a little confused. What's going on? Just now on TV, it said that if a man keeps helping like this, he will grow up. Hearing Jianghai's doubts, Biriak couldn't help but smile and say. But hearing this, Jianghai couldn't help but roll his eyes at them. They only watch those nonsense shows. He only knows that if a woman is pregnant, the baby will grow up. And it's not very good if it's all big. At least, Jianghai is not used to it. All his women are the same as Wallace Shelley. Sometimes, some differences are more interesting. Okay, I will stay here tonight, so you don't have to worry. I came here to ask, is there any progress on the task I gave you? Although he said so, Jianghai didn't put Lei Lizi down, but asked directly. Okay, I will stay here tonight, so you don't have to worry. Hearing Jianghai's words, the four people here looked at each other. This is the first time that Jianghai asked them about the progress of the task book. But to be honest, although they have checked a lot these days, the progress of the task is not very satisfactory to them. There is some progress in some direction, but it is not to the level that can be confirmed. Looking at Jianghai in front of her, Valentina spoke first, and the other three here also became serious. Chapter 802. You gave us a total of 2 missions. The first mission is about news of Ezo Adis. I'm really sorry about this news. We can only confirm that he's still alive because the satellite once photographed him and a group of people going to New Jersey. However, we couldn't find out his exact location, what he did, or the identity of those people. We can only confirm that those people should be some soldiers or mercenaries. Seeing Jianghai ask, Valentina, who was in charge of a mission here, couldn't help but say to him. Speaking of which, this is also her dereliction of duty. If she had been more serious at the beginning, maybe that person wouldn't have escaped. Oh, I understand this. What about the second mission? Hearing her words, Jianghai nodded. In fact, Jianghai is quite satisfied with what Valentina did. She found the location of the other party one step ahead of the police, and then almost forced the other party into a desperate situation. She only missed a small fish, which made Jianghai's evaluation of her actually quite high. After all, she only has herself, unlike before, where there are many tarantulas, poisonous spiders, web spiders, and her team to serve her. Jianghai is still clear about the difference between a person and a team, so he is still quite satisfied. The second mission is about the badge. I have also followed up on that, and I roughly know the situation. That badge was leaked from an Antarctic exploration mission launched by the United States. That Antarctic exploration mission was said to be to explore the Antarctic continent, but in fact, I heard that it was to find the former Third Reich of Germany, but they didn't find anything. The person who leaked it was also dealt with, but because that person used to work in the military, he didn't die, but he lost his military position. There are rumors that he went back to his hometown, but the location of his hometown is only recorded in California. I don't know what he did specifically. After watching Valentina in front of him tell him the news, Sarah also told him the news about himself. Hearing her words, Jianghu also nodded. She can know so much with just a badge. Indeed, Galina Sarah is also very outstanding, but now he knows more detailed information by accident. The first thing is to continue to follow up. The second thing, you can narrow down the scope. You can check a person named Bruce David in Los Angeles or San Francisco. He should be running or used to run a bar. You can check if he is the person I'm looking for. Looking at Sarah in front of him, Jianghu said seriously. Hearing Jianghu's words, Sarah nodded seriously. She didn't deny what Jianghu told her, but she was ready to go and take a look. Of course, if it wasn't true, she would have quietly told Jianghu, but she wouldn't question Jianghu in front of others. So these women were actually very smart. Okay, girls, the business is over, we should also have some fun together. After watching Sarah write down what he said, he directly picked up Lei Lizzie in front of him. In her exclamation, his big mouth instantly touched her lips. Feeling the strong breath of Jianghu, Lei Lizzie was stunned at first, then she really counterattacked. She was one of the strongest people in the world, so she really enjoyed fighting with Jianghu for half a day. Seeing that Lei Lizzie's battle had begun, the other girls couldn't help but laugh, and then directly rushed into Jianghu's arms. The night was silent. Of course, if it had to be described, it would only be a few adjectives, such as gunfire and so on. Any more detailed description would be sealed, so in order not to be sealed, they could only be described in a single stroke. Early the next morning, Jianghu woke up from a pile of fragrant legs and jade-like arms. Looking at the time, it was almost 8 o'clock. Jianghu was ready to return to Winthrop. After kissing the heads of these girls one by one, Jianghu jumped out of bed. In fact, he knew that these girls had already woken up, but everyone had their own habits. These girls didn't like the feeling of leaving, and they didn't like the feeling of leaving. In the past, when they went back to accompany Jianghu, they would quietly get up in the morning and leave. Jianghu wouldn't say anything when he woke up. Now that Jianghu had left, although he knew that they were already awake, Jianghu wouldn't say anything. He also didn't like the feeling of leaving. Looking at the new set of toiletries in the bathroom, Jianghu also smiled. After opening it, he washed his face, brushed his teeth, and then carefully placed his cup next to the 4 cups, indicating that he also had a place here. After that, Jianghu went downstairs, walked to the lawn, and prepared to go to the garage to pick up the car. You, who are you? Just as Jianghu was about to walk to the garage, 2 high school students who looked very similar suddenly looked at Jianghu with vigilance and surprise. Looking at their appearance, Jianghu was also a little confused. He didn't seem to know them, so why did they look at him as if he was a ghost? He didn't understand. Oh. What's the matter? Do we know each other? Looking at these people in front of him, Jianghu asked with some doubts. You just walked out of Sarah's sister's house. Who are you? Why did you come out from there? Hearing Jianghu's words, these 2 high school students were clearly a little nervous, but they still mustered up the courage to speak loudly. Sarah, Sarah? Well, if you think about it, I should be her boyfriend. Looking at these 2 people, Jianghu couldn't help but smile. In fact, he was also young once, so he naturally knew what these 2 guys meant now. Looking at their clothes and the direction they came from, they should also live nearby. From the fact that he knew Sarah's name, he should know Sarah. Looking at his nervous, excited, and longing eyes, he should have a crush on Sarah. Indeed, women like Sarah, no, to be exact, women like Sarah, Valentina, Biyao, and Lalies are actually quite attractive to those high school students. They are young, not much older than them, but they are very mature, good-looking, and have perfect figures. In addition, they need to disguise themselves, so they are usually kind to others. Such women, in the eyes of those inexperienced high school students, are perfect goddesses. It was just like some girl groups. Although they only needed to sing, dance, and become idols, it was possible that just a small action would make those high school students who were their fans go crazy. Although Valentina and the others are not idols, they are obviously perfect goddesses in the eyes of these people. In fact, similar to what Jianghu thought, these two boys are a pair of brothers who live nearby. They are 1 year apart in age. One is a sophomore, and the other is a freshman. In high school, the one who met Sarah first, because the two brothers were on the same level and were often bullied by some bad boys in the neighborhood. Of course, this is a rich area, and bad boys do not mean that they are gangsters. At most, they are some delinquents who snatch pocket money and so on. But once, they were met by Sarah. That day was the day Jianghu went to the company. Because she saw Jianghu, Sarah was in a good mood. She did a good deed every day, so she taught those delinquents a lesson and saved the two brothers. And the one who came back with her was Valentina. The two brothers also met Sarah and Valentina Trotsky, and from then on, their first love appeared. Every morning, they would rather be late for school and wait here for Valentina and Sarah, just to say, "Hi, good morning." But today, they waited for Jianghu. However, if Jianghu wanted to say that it was his first love, especially his secret love, it would be severely shattered by reality. When he was in high school, he also had a secret love for his school's campus bell, but one Friday, he saw his school's campus bell being touched by a man who could be her uncle, and got into a BMW. That day, he knew that his first love was a story, and stories were all lies. So now, he said it directly. Damn it, how is it possible? How could Sister Sarah like someone like you? After hearing Jianghu's words, the high school student instantly collapsed and shouted loudly. Oh, why is it impossible? Because I'm rich. This world is the world of the rich. Let me tell you, not only is Sarah my woman, but the other girls in this villa are also my women. I was with them yesterday. Hearing her crazy words, Jianghu couldn't help but pick his nose with his hand. After digging out a lump of booger, he gently flicked it away, and then said impatiently. After hearing Jianghu's words, the other high school student also seemed to be struck by lightning. Rich? What's the use of having money? You guy, do you think you can override human nature just because you have some stinky money? These two cowards didn't dare to directly come up and fight with Jianghu. They only dared to shout about chicken soup and the like. I don't know if I'm above human nature, but at least I'm lying on top of them. Listening to his words, Jianghu said with a disdainful look, then opened the garage door and taught the little brats a lesson. He was still in a good mood, so he deliberately got on his shield, honked twice, and left with a disdainful look. Looking at the back of Jianghu's car, the eyes of these two people were full of anger and despair. Glancing at the villa beside them, they were really heartbroken. Their goddess actually. Their life, their belief, collapsed just like that. Chapter 803. Boss, don't do that. Someone else will see. Huali Shelley said shyly as she sat in Jianghu's arms. But she didn't make any other movements. She didn't even try to push him away. Instead, her body continued to move forward. She wanted Jianghu to be in a more convenient and comfortable position, playing with her two indescribable things. What's there to be afraid of? If someone else sees, I'll take her down too. Besides, who haven't you seen before? Listening to Wallace Shelley's words, Jianghu looked at her with a smile, then said very indifferently, but his hands did not stop at all. Really, I didn't think after leaving the organization, I'd be out of the tiger's den and into the wolf's den. How did I end up with such a strong boss like you? Huali Shelley heard Jianghu's words. She couldn't help but smile and roll her eyes at him. But she didn't resist. Instead, she pulled her clothes up a bit more. It had to be said that Huali Shelley was a wonderful person. a wonderful woman. She knew how to please Jianghu. Compared to other people, she put more energy into enjoying life and fulfilling the tasks Jianghu gave her. She also tried to please Jianghu, but still had a bottom line. But she put more effort into pleasing Jianghu. As long as Jianghu wanted, Jianghu didn't even need to say anything. She'd take the initiative to come over and let Jianghu do whatever he wanted. And she'd never get tired of it. Just like today. She just walked over and saw Jianghu staring at her. She took the initiative to throw herself into his arms. So long as Jianghu wanted, she could do anything. Of all the girls, she was the first one to be completely dominated by Jianghu. Complete domination included front, back and top. It didn't matter the occasion or the place. As long as Jianghu wanted, she could help him solve it. In addition to helping Jianghu in this regard, sometimes at night when a few people were together, the girls were usually attracted to Jianghu, but also to Jianghu. They almost interacted with each other, unlike Prawalton. In fact, they liked each other more. Jianghu was actually an accessory. But he had to admit that at the beginning of the war, sometimes vision was still very important. Especially when two girls were together, it stimulated Jianghu's feelings. But in the past, the girls around him couldn't let go. But after Huali Shelley joined, she took the initiative to help Jianghu create a visual conflict, which made Jianghu feel very comfortable. Naturally, he liked Huali Shelley more and more. At the same time, one needed to be strong to forge iron. Huali Shelley was also quite good at this. She was very beautiful. Among Jianghu's bodyguards, she should be the most beautiful except for Azalina and Galina. Of course, if you take into account the bonus points of her figure, she might be the most beautiful. Her figure was completely out of human common sense. Since she followed Jianghu, some parts of her that couldn't be described seemed to be getting bigger and bigger. At the same time, they were quite firm and quite soft. But there was no effect of gravity. And although she wasn't pregnant, there was always a milk fragrance. Jianghu usually liked to play with these two things. It felt very good, just like now, he was doing it. And although Huali Shelley said so, in fact, she said so because she knew that Jianghu liked to hear her say so. She was really a very good person for Jianghu. But a while ago, because of the summer, it was too hot, so the two restrained a little. But Winthrop was similar to the weather in the north of Wuxia. After the beginning of autumn, it would quickly become cold. Although it wouldn't snow in a few days, at least the temperature was dropping at a speed visible to the naked eye. Just like now, it was already mid-September. The temperature in Winthrop was basically 21 or 22 degrees during the day. It was already possible to wear long-sleeved sweaters. The temperature at night was about 16 degrees, so there was no need to turn on the air conditioner to sleep. Sometimes, they even had to close the window to sleep. Otherwise, it would be a little cold. So when the two were together, they didn't feel hot. Of course, the scene was easy to make people feel hot. But at this time, the door of Jianghu's villa suddenly opened, and then they saw Qi Jia and Chia coming in from outside. At a glance, they saw the situation in the house and couldn't help but roll their eyes at Jianghu and Huali Shelley. One of Huali Shelley's best ways was not only to please Jianghu, but also to please everyone in the villa. If Jianghu was the owner of this villa, then the most popular one was Aphrodite in the past, but now it was Huali Shelley. Because almost every woman here had been taken care of by her, and their relationship with her was quite good. After all, they had done something together. At first, they were a little embarrassed. But now they were a little used to it, and she and Jianghu's actions were also a little strange. Okay, if you want to play, go upstairs and play, Marian and Daliana will be back soon. Walking to Jianghu's side, Qi Jia patted Jianghu's shoulder and said to him. Hearing Qi Jia's words, Jianghu also chuckled. As for Huali Shelley, she also stood up and pulled down her clothes directly. As mentioned before, these girls were wearing quite cool clothes in Jianghu's villa. Except for Daliana, Marian, and the newcomer Taraga, the other women's clothes were mainly simple. Basically, they wouldn't wear a vest. In summer, they would just wear a short-sleeved shirt, which allowed them to see everything they wanted to see. If it was the hottest time, they would only wear a gauze jacket. They basically didn't wear pants, only a pair of underwear. Therefore, the employees who knew what the women in Jianghai's villa wore would call Jianghai in advance and tell Jianghai that they were coming. Otherwise, they wouldn't come easily. But basically, they wouldn't come to Jianghai, because Jianghai wasn't the kind of person who immersed himself in the land of women. Every morning, he would walk around his manor, going to the stable, the cowshed, the dock, and the wine manor. So if there was anything, he would say it in the morning. Cough, the vegetable garden is almost done. Seeing Wallace Shelley stand up, Jianghai also coughed and sat up straight to block something that was out of control. At the same time, he looked at Qi Jia and Qi and said. It was now autumn. Although Jianghai had built a greenhouse, many of the ripe vegetables were ready to be stored in the warehouse. The rice was almost fully grown. These days, Qi Jia and the others were busy with these things. Of course, they were all very light work. They weren't busy or tired. Otherwise, Jianghai would have gone to help. For example, when they were harvesting rice. He had already contacted a nearby manor that planted wheat and rice and borrowed their machinery to harvest rice. In the United States, most Americans ate oats in the morning, and they usually ate bread, so they planted wheat. They grow very little rice. Very little. How many Americans have you seen eating rice? But the United States was a multi-ethnic country, and there were many Asians in Boston. Asians, such as Wuxia, Japanese, and Korean, all ate rice, so some people here also planted rice, but it was very little. Americans were more willing to import rice from Asia to sell, because it could be sold at a high price, and it was more convenient. When Jianghai was planting rice, he had to look for a lot of people in Winthrop before he was able to find a transplanter. Now that he wanted to harvest the rice, it was naturally very troublesome. He believed that after these new rice were harvested, the taste of his rice would be very good. Well, there wasn't much to harvest in the vegetable garden. Originally, Sister Feng wanted pickled cabbage, but after calling her mother to ask the steps of pickling cabbage, she gave up. Hee. Oh right, what do you think this is? Hearing Jianghai's words, Qi Xia said with a smile. The thin and weak girl who came to Jianghai for treatment had unknowingly grown up, and her illness had also been cured. But her pure white hair and her body temperature that was lower than Jianghai's all year round made her the person that Jianghai liked to hug the most to sleep. Looking at this cute girl, Jianghai also smiled, then lowered his head and looked at the thing that she handed over. When he saw it, Jianghai was stunned for a moment, because Jianghai did recognize this thing. Where did this come from? Pointing at the small thing in front of him, Jianghai asked with some doubts. You'll have to ask little Huang about this. He found me. I saw him holding this thing in his mouth, so I snatched it away. I didn't expect it to be this thing. Hearing Jianghai's words, Qi said very seriously. To be honest, as a chef, the things that made her happiest were Jianghai and finding good ingredients. Yes, this thing was an excellent ingredient. It could be said that it was one of the top ingredients in Western cuisine in the world, but it was rarely used in Chinese cuisine. Qi was a Chinese chef, so although she knew that this was an excellent ingredient, she was not too excited. This was because there were very few things that she could cook. On the contrary, Jianghai was a little surprised. Because in his view, this thing was not as simple as an ingredient, this thing also represented money. Because this thing was called Song Lu. Chapter 804. To be honest, in the beginning, Jianghai wasn't interested in truffles. It was understandable. His taste was very Wuxia, so he didn't like to eat Western food. People's preferences were like this. If he didn't like to eat it, he would subconsciously ignore it. Moreover, if he wanted to plant truffles, he needed to have high conditions. He needed cows and fish, so Jianghu didn't think about truffles. Later, after tasting it at Du Feimin's place, Jianghu became very interested. Of course, the so-called interest wasn't because he felt that it was delicious, but because it was so expensive. He wanted to take a look at it. After he came back, he went to get some truffle seeds. Of course, truffles were similar to mushrooms. They weren't counted as seeds. Speaking of which, they weren't considered as mycelium. If you want to plant truffles, you have to use sterile saplings to artificially infect them. Then, you have to bury the trees in a suitable place for them to grow and carry out meticulous maintenance and management. Generally speaking, it would take 4 to 5 years for truffles to grow. Then, the production would slowly increase. It could take up to 40 to 50 years to produce truffles. However, Jianghu didn't know about this. Therefore, after he got these saplings, he planted them in his forest. This was the kind of person he was. He was passionate for 3 minutes, but after a few visits, he became a little lazy. Then, he divided the saplings into a few days. After injecting some spiritual energy into each of the saplings, he no longer cared about them. Unknowingly, it seemed like a period of time had passed. However, he didn't expect this thing to grow. After taking the truffles from Chia, Jianghu carefully looked at them. He was very sure that these things were indeed edible. Moreover, they weren't particularly small. They were about 2 fingers thick. They were very good-looking white truffles. It weighed about a dozen grams. Don't underestimate this dozen grams of white truffle. The price of this truffle had always been high because artificial cultivation had only started in recent years. According to Jianghu's understanding, these things were calculated according to special grade, first grade, second grade, and so on. According to the diameter, the price was also different. The difference between them was quite big. For example, black truffles, if sold in China, the cheapest one was 400 yuan per kilogram. Of course, this was also extremely expensive. The most expensive one was 1,200 yuan, and 2,000 yuan per kilogram was very common. But one had to know that Jianghu's white truffle was not cheap when he bought it. Now that he wanted to sell it, it naturally would not be cheap. The most expensive white truffle was from Italy, but Jianghu believed that it wouldn't be cheap here. Based on the price in 2013, it was $3,500 per kilogram. Of course, the price dropped a little in 2014, but it still wouldn't be less than $2,000 per kilogram. If it was special grade, then the price would be even more terrifying. Jianghu's beef was advertised and promoted. 1 kilogram was about $500, which was already unbelievably expensive. One had to know that without advertising and promotion, Jianghu's beef was only about $400 per kilogram. This truffle was several times more expensive than his beef. He originally thought that his cultivation had failed. After all, he didn't care about it. Even if there was a harvest, it would have to wait a few years. But now, it seemed that these things were quite lively. He had to admit that Jianghu was a man of his word. If there was no spiritual energy, he would be a very ordinary loser. He had to admit that sometimes, a cheat was really important. I'll go look for it. Looking at the weather outside, Jianghu saw that it was quite good. The autumn air was refreshing, so Jianghu took the truffle and went out of the room. As soon as he came out, he saw Xiao Huang and Xiao Bai playing with each other in the grass. Seeing this scene, Jianghu couldn't help but feel a little amused. It seemed that Xiao Bai's strength was slowly approaching Goldie's. One had to know that when they first arrived, Goldie completely suppressed Xiao Bai's existence. The 2 dogs couldn't play together. Xiao Bai had to play with Dai Teeth and Qiuqiu, but now it didn't care about Dai Teeth. Qiuqiu also settled on the roof all year round. However, Dai Feng was quite happy because he had a lot of people to bully. For example, the 2 guinea pigs and the white-haired Greenland seal. He still had people to accompany him as he enjoyed being the boss. Seeing that they were playing together, Jianghu whistled. After the 2 dogs heard Jianghu's whistle, they immediately ran over and squatted in front of Jianghu. They opened their mouths and looked at Jianghu. "You found this truffle, right? Take me to the place where you found it and see if there are any more." After patting the two dogs' heads, Jianghu said to Goldie. After hearing Jianghu's words, Goldie, who was originally very smart, naturally understood his words. Goldie then ran towards the forest in the distance. Seeing his movements, Jianghu stood up and ran towards the forest in the distance. Not long after, they arrived at the periphery of the forest. As soon as they entered the forest, Jianghu felt that the temperature in the forest was much colder than outside. Originally, the forest looked very sunny from the outside. But for some unknown reason, as soon as he entered the forest, he felt that the inside of the forest was somewhat cold. It was as if a cold wind was blowing. This made Jianghu somewhat puzzled. One must know that in his manner, other places were very sunny. In the past, when they came here to play, it was also very sunny. How long has it been since they came here? Why does it feel like this place is haunted? But soon, before Jianghu could think about these things, Goldie had already brought him to the place where he found the white truffle. It can be seen that this forest was much younger than the forest next to it. But although it was much younger, the trees were growing quite well. The ground here was very fertile, and most importantly, Jianghu's spiritual energy was very strong. These trees, in less than a year, had already grown to about 3 meters tall. They were about the same as a 3-year-old tree. But if you cut down these trees, you will find that they were really new trees. Jianghu naturally wouldn't cut down these trees. According to Goldie's guidance, Jianghu also came to this forest. Goldie sniffed the ground, then his 2 front legs began to dig quickly. Before long, 2 pieces of soil were dug out of the ground. Goldie, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately held the 2 pieces of soil in his mouth and went in front of Jianghu. After Jianghu took the soil, he saw that it was indeed a white truffle. Moreover, it was similar to the one in his hand. It was about 2 fingers wide and 2 fingers long. It was very ugly, gray, and somewhat yellow. Jianghu wasn't naive to think that white truffles were white. It was only compared to black truffles. Jianghu looked at the 2 truffles in front of him and couldn't help but smile. Sure enough, there was such a thing here. Where else is it? But this time, you don't have to dig it out, just tell me. Patting Goldie's head, Jianghu smiled and said to him. Hearing Jianghu's words, Goldie also quickly searched the forest. It didn't take long for him to determine that this forest wasn't big. There were more than 20 trees, less than 30 trees. There were about a dozen places with truffles. Of course, these things were still very little. After all, it was only the first year. Generally speaking, after planting, it would take 4 years for truffles to grow. But now, truffles have already grown in the first year. If it grows too much, then it would be a bit scary. Jianghu's aura can be used to its fullest extent. Originally, it was the limit of this organism, but it can't change the genes of this organism. For example, if he wants to turn a cat into a tiger, this is impossible. But he could turn a North American mountain lion into a North American lion. Just as Jianghu was thinking about this, suddenly a fishy smell rushed into his nose. This made Jianghu look back in an instant, but this look also startled Jianghu. At this time, in Jianghu's line of sight, a giant python was coiled not far behind him, spitting its tongue at him. But the reason why he was only startled is that Jianghu had already recognized the identity of this giant python. Judging from the fact that Goldie and Xiaobai didn't issue a warning, this giant python should be one of his former pets, the water monster that he saved in the past. It's just that he hasn't seen it for almost a year, and this guy is getting bigger and bigger. This aura is a bit scary. Looking at this giant beast, Jianghu couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva because this guy was indeed a little strangely long. When Jianghu first saw it, it was only 3 or 4 meters long. The thickest part was about the same size as an ordinary man's calf. It wasn't very big. Jianghu knew that after absorbing the aura, this guy would very likely become longer and stronger like the mountain lion. However, he didn't expect it to become so terrifying. At this time, this guy had already grown into a giant beast. The thickest part was almost as thick as Jianghu's waist. Jianghu was more than 1.9 meters tall, and his muscles were very dense, so he weighed more than 200 kilograms. His waist was 3 feet, which was about 1 meter. This guy was already so thick before eating. As for how long it was, Jianghu didn't know, but it definitely wouldn't be short. Seeing that Jianghu was looking at it, the giant python spat out its tongue even more happily and then slowly swam over. Jianghu knew that it had no malice towards him, but seeing this guy swim over like this, Jianghu's scalp tingled a little. Chapter 805. Hello, it's been a long time. Looking at the giant snake in front of him, Jianghu smiled and patted its head. Looking at Jianghu's hand, the snake hesitated at first. After all, this was a snake, a wild animal, not a domestic pet, so it was reasonable for it to hesitate. However, it still couldn't refuse Jianghu's hand. It wanted to dodge, but it still let Jianghu's hand touch it. Cold-blooded animals are not like hot-blooded animals. They enjoy this kind of caress very much. Just like Little Yellow, Xiaobai, and even Dai Fong, they all like to let Jianghu scratch them. However, cold-blooded animals feel that this is very strange, but it still endured it. Perhaps feeling that it didn't like this, Jianghu only touched it twice and gave up. Take me to see that big guy. After retracting his hand, Jianghu's main purpose of coming here was achieved. That was to come and see the growth of the truffles. Knowing that the truffles were still growing, Jianghu was relieved. Anyway, there was nothing to do now. Let's go and see the other 2 tyrants in this forest. After hearing Jianghu's words, the giant python couldn't help but stick out its tongue, then turned its head and slowly swam into the forest. Jianghu also walked into the forest with it. At this time, Jianghu walked behind the giant python and realized that this giant python was really big. The largest snake in the world was the water python. Its largest body length was 5 to 8 meters, and the record for the largest living snake was 6 meters. But at this time, this water serpent has already broken the record of a living creature. According to Jianghu's visual estimation, this water serpent is at least 7 meters long. Although it has not reached its maximum size, it is obvious that this guy can still grow a lot. With the movement of the spiritual energy and the rich ingredients in this forest, it was bound to grow again. Jianghu was now looking forward to it. If he saw this guy again next year, how big would it be? Would it be like Dasha and exceed 10 meters? If it really broke 10 meters, it wouldn't be a water gloom anymore. This will remind Jianghu of the legendary world's largest snake, the extinct Titan python. It is known as the most terrifying cold-blooded animal after the dinosaurs, but since his lion can become a North American lion, why can't his water serpent become a Titan python? Now that he thought about it, he was a little excited. Hiss! Just as Jianghu was thinking while walking, the water gloom in front of him couldn't help but stop as it heard a hissing sound. Hearing this sound, Jianghu also reacted and looked at the open space in front of him. It was still the same place, the pond in the forest and the forest next to it. With the hissing sound of the water python, some splashes appeared in the pond over there. In the distant forest, there was also the sound of a zoo rubbing against the grass. Almost at the same time, 2 huge figures emerged from these 2 places. The one in the pond was naturally the huge crocodile, but at this time, it was naturally much bigger than last year, just like the water gloom. At a glance, Jianghu felt that it was very different. The hard armor behind it, the snake-like eyes, and the sharp teeth in its mouth all made people shudder. Moreover, its body seemed to be even bigger than the water gloom. It seemed that its breakthrough was just around the corner. In the forest on the other side, a figure emerged at this time. It was none other than Jianghu, one of the first wild animals he came into contact with, the mountain lion. However, When Jianghu first came into contact with this mountain lion was still an expectant mother. Not long after, it had been promoted to a mother. When he saw it last year, it and its children were still living quite happily, but today, it seemed that only it was left. Lions, tigers, and other animals were all like this. They would raise their cubs until they reached a certain age, basically around 2 years old. Then, they would drive these cubs away, mainly because these guys had grown up and needed their own living space. And these felines also had their own territory. This was also deeply engraved in their DNA. Therefore, although Jianghu's forest was extremely rich in resources, as a mother, she still drove her children away. Jianghu had nothing to say about this, but this guy's body was a little bigger than last year. When this North American mountain lion saw Jianghu, it was also very excited and rushed over at once. Then its huge head kept squeezing Jianghu's chest, and Jianghu also scratched its fur with his hands. This guy liked Jianghu scratching its fur very much, not as disgusted as cold-blooded animals. I really didn't expect you to be getting bigger and bigger. While scratching this big guy, Jianghu said with a smile. To be honest, Jianghu can see that these guys are doing well, and he is also quite pleased. After seeing that it was Jianghu, the big crocodile shook its head, but it wasn't asking for attention. Instead, it turned around and dived into the water. After waiting for a while, it resurfaced with something in its mouth and threw it in front of Jianghu. Hearing the noise, Jianghu also looked at the thing thrown by this guy. But after taking a closer look, Jianghu was a little surprised, because this thing looks like a bunch of rags, and it's obviously a few days old. He squatted down and looked at it. These rags exuded a stench, then picked up a small wooden stick. Jianghu picked up the rags and found some parts inside. These parts are very familiar to Jianghu. Guns? Looking at these things, Jianghu looked at the 3 animals in front of him with some doubts. Maybe it saw Jianghu's gaze, the mountain lion cried proudly. Looking at its appearance, Jianghu couldn't help but imagine. People who bring guns into this forest are obviously not good people. The people in Jianghu's manor know all the animals here, so naturally, they won't be injured. These bad guys entered this forest, but obviously, they were dealt with by these 3 guys. Well done, if anyone dares to sneak in, eat them for me, but you have to pay attention to your own safety. After imagining the course of events, Jianghu nodded to the 3 animals in front of him. This can be regarded as affirmation of their merits. Then he touched their heads one by one and transmitted his aura to them. This can also be regarded as a reward for praising them. Feeling the baptism of aura, these 3 animals were very happy. Jianghu wanted to see what kind of terrifying creatures they would become under his care. No one would complain about having too many trump cards, right? After playing with these animals in the forest for a while, Jianghu returned to his villa and gave the new truffle he dug up to Chia. Looking at the truffle that Jianghu dug up, Chia was also very surprised. When did we plant truffles in our manor? Looking at the white truffle in her hand, she originally thought that getting one would be good enough. She didn't expect that after Jianghu went out for a walk, he actually got a few more. According to her estimation, the white truffles in her hand alone will be sold for thousands of dollars. It is really because this thing is too expensive. Hey, you don't have to worry about this. If this thing is gone in the future, you can tell me that our forest produces this thing. Hearing Chia's words, Jianghu also said with a smile. He didn't tell Chia the truth, because Chia knows these things. The truffle that was planted in the past can't bear such a big truffle without 4 years. It doesn't matter if others don't know, but if it is spread out, he may have more trouble. In fact, if Jianghu wasn't really short of money, now it seems that it is better to hide the beef and fish of the past. Sometimes, it is more in line with his interests to sell secretly, but now that it is announced, then let it be announced. But he still has to put more energy on the beef and fish. As for other things, he still has to hide them. Okay. Chia is a very traditional Wuxia woman. She will not ask the root of the matter. Now that she got Jiang Hai's answer, she also smiled and walked into the kitchen with the truffle. She wants to study the truffle cake that will be made tonight. Jiang Hai continued to go back to his reclining chair. His life has been like this recently. No matter what others do, he is living a very good life. Monotonous life is his favorite. But in the evening, Robbins Garcia gave Jiang Hai a call. Today, Pra Walton took away a batch of cattle from the manor. At present, there are about 10,000 cattle left, including 4,000 cows, 3,000 calves, and 3,000 bulls. In other words, it is time for Jiang Hai to buy cattle again, and this time, Robbins Garcia and Jiang Hai have a good discussion about what cattle to buy and how many cattle to buy. Because Jiang Hai's pasture is not the same as before. His land area has expanded by nearly 150%, and this pasture is not a problem to raise 100,000 cattle. But he knows that Jiang Hai is not prepared to raise so many cattle, because he wants to use the new land to sell grass. But Jiang Hai has to decide on the specifics. As for Jiang Hai, he didn't know what to raise for the new cattle. He knew that the Angus cattle must be raised. After all, almost everything in his manor was made according to the Angus cattle, including the cowshed, food, and so on. But now the problem in front of him was, should he just raise the Angus cattle, or should he mix in some other cattle, or should he open a second place to raise cattle? Were those grasslands really all for selling grass? He needs to consider this. Chapter 806. Miss Pra Walton, today's beef distribution has ended. This is the detailed report. Holding the report in her hand, Isabel Roland pushed open the door of Pra Walton's room and said to the person inside, but halfway through, she couldn't help but see the situation inside, then she couldn't help but blush and immediately closed the door. "Isa, you came just in time, come over and help me." Looking at Isabel who came in, Pra Walton, who was lying on the bed, couldn't help but say to her loudly. Hearing Pra Walton's words, Isabel Roland couldn't help but blush, but she didn't say anything. She quickly came to Pra Walton's bed, then lay on it, her head sticking to one of Pra Walton's indescribable places, and Pra Walton also narrowed his eyes in fascination. About 10 minutes later, Pra Walton groaned, and a lot of water stains appeared on Isabel's face. Standing up, Isabel took a few pieces of paper from the bedside table, wiped it carefully, and then looked at Pra Walton with some complaints, and Pra Walton couldn't help but smile awkwardly, but she didn't care about this. After pulling Isabel, Pra Walton's lips were also on her lips. After a long time, their lips parted, and Pra Walton also lay on the bed lazily, showing endless nobility in his gestures. "Sigh, I solved it myself, and you solved it. It is indeed far worse than the real guy. The sense of fulfillment and security that Jiang Hai gives me is something that you can't give me." With a sigh, Pra Walton said helplessly. "Since you want it, you can go to him, anyway, this place is not far from his manor." Looking at Pra Walton, Isabel wiped her face and said slowly. "Oh, you think I don't want to go? There are so many things here, how can I go just because I want to?" Pra Walton rolled her eyes at Isabel Roland and said unwillingly. Upon hearing her words, Isabel Roland smiled. No one knew better than her how busy Pra Walton had been recently. Now, Pra Walton's position in the Walmart group had once again risen to a higher level. It was for no other reason than Jiang Hai's fish. Jiang Hai's fish was the same as his beef. The quality of his fish was there to sell at a high price. And by selling at a high price, not only did Jiang Hai benefit, but the Walmart group, or to be exact, Sam's Club also benefited. After that banquet, Jiang Hai made it clear that he was only doing business with Pra Walton. However, Sam's Finger Club was making money, and so was the Walmart group. For ordinary people, whether a group was profitable or not depended on its shares, but for shareholders, income was the most important thing. Last year, Jiang Hai's beef made Sam's Club earn an extra $300 million. After dividing the $300 million, each person earned tens of millions. And this year, with more fish and more beef, they will earn even more. A conservative estimate is that Sam's Club will earn about $800 million from selling Jianghu's beef and fish. This is equivalent to those major shareholders earning tens of millions a year. Walton almost instantly became a fragrance in the eyes of these people. Americans are so realistic. If you can create wealth for others, then you are their god. If you can't, then you are a stinky B***tch. Everything has to be based on benefits. This is the law of society. This is completely different from Wuxia. For example, some famous NBA stars, such as Allen Iverson and Marbury, who did not come from good families, after they became famous, they gave the money they earned to their former brothers to spend. For them to pay bail, it is very likely that they will spend all their wealth. This is a very particular thing in the eyes of Wuxia people. This kind of man is suitable to be friends with, and their brothers will also give him feedback. It's just that outsiders can't see it. In Wuxia, many people will talk about these things and feel that their personality is more charming. But in the United States, this is a teaching material for the opposite. They believe in elite education. Elites should play with other elites. People like Allen Iverson should hang out with those rich and powerful people. They should not hang out with those bastards from the neighborhood. Even if they used to take care of you, even if they grew up with you, trash is trash. This is destroying yourself. It is hard to say which of these two ideas is better and which is worse, but you have to follow the rules of the country you are in. Now that they are in the United States, Walton and Jianghu, who can create wealth for them, are the people they want to curry favor with. But as the saying goes, the bird that sticks out will be shot. Their current position is very important, so there are many people watching them. There are some national institutions, of course, they are not looking for Jianghu's secret recipe. In the United States, this is a good thing. They are quite concerned about human rights. If you have something good, you must give it to the country. You can keep it for yourself. If you can't keep it, then it is another matter. If you can keep it, then no one will care about it. The ones who are watching Walton are the tax authorities. This is the real big deal. Secondly, there are the factions in those companies. It can be said that if it were not for Jianghu, Walton may have been pulled down. After all, this position is a position of real power, and it is a position of rich real power. It can be foreseen that Walton has been very careful now. She is also very busy, so busy that she has no time to see Jianghu. That guy is really too much. I am creating wealth for him, but he doesn't even come to see me. Hearing Isabel Roland's words, Walton can't help but complain. Then she touched the two places that can't be described. Is my charm not high? This guy doesn't even come to see me. Heh, you also know how slow that guy Jianghu is. If you don't tell him, he won't come over. However, I have a chance for you to be alone with him. Looking at Walton in front of her, Isabel Roland said with a smile. Hearing her words, Walton's eyes lit up in an instant. Tell me, what opportunity? Hearing her words, Walton said with shining eyes. To be honest, she really wants to see Jianghu now. Not only does her heart need Jianghu, but her body also needs him. According to the beef report sent today, there are about 3,000 beef cattle that can be sold in Jianghu's manor. This is the amount of beef cattle to support the winter. That is to say, Jianghu is going to buy beef cattle again soon. As his biggest customer, you can naturally accompany him to see the beef cattle, right? Hearing Walton's words, Isabel Roland couldn't help laughing. Hearing her words, Walton's eyes lit up at once. This is a good excuse. Okay, then I'll talk to the board tomorrow. But before that, I have to call Jianghu and tell him not to rush to buy. Hearing Isabel Roland's words, Walton also said seriously. At the same time, thinking of Jianghu, her tongue couldn't help but lick her lips, feeling some parts of her contracted. She seems to like Jianghu more and more. At this time, Jianghu, Robbins Garcia, Burke Dollar, and Philman Turner were drinking in the courtyard in front of his villa. This afternoon, Robbins Garcia called Jianghu and asked him if he was free in the evening. They should discuss what kind of cattle to buy. Jianghu thought for a moment and told him to call Burkdollar and Philman Turner over after buying the cattle in the evening to discuss the introduction of cattle. Because there were new cowboys this time and a large enough pasture, Jianghu didn't plan to open a new pasture, but he could raise more cattle. This time, in addition to the cows and calves, he planned to buy 35,000 more cattle, making a total of 40,000. Among them, Angus cattle were the main breed. After all, other than this type of cattle, other cattle were not so easy to buy in large quantities. Jianghu was going to buy 25,000 Angus cattle. As for the other 10,000 cattle, Jianghu was going to try more cattle breeds. Because he had a lot of people now, and he planned to wait for a while. He planned to get some cattle dogs. These dogs were very useful when guarding large herds of cattle. But just as they were discussing there, Jianghu's phone rang. After picking up the phone, Jianghu deliberately turned to another place to talk. Robbins Garcia and the others wouldn't ask about it. That was the boss's secret, and they didn't want to do it anymore. So the three of them were still there, discussing what kind of cattle to buy and how many to buy. If there were workers in Jianghu's manor who were the most confident, it must be these cowboys. But just as they were talking there, Jianghu came back from a distance with a smile on his face. "Boss, what's the good news?" Looking at Jianghu, Philemon Turner asked him with a smile. "Ah, it's a good thing. Pulla Walton is coming. Don't look at me like that. This time, he's here for official business. We can relax on the issue of cattle breeding, because he's here to solve the problem of cattle breeding." Looking at the three people in front of him, when they heard that Pra Walton was coming, they pretended not to know anything. Jianghu couldn't help but smile, then he told them the purpose of Pra Walton's visit. Of course, some things were just incidental. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.